Chapter 41. I'm going to the kitchen. Secondly, weight. Changes in weight show that the essence of an object has been altered. Professor McGonagall set the two students' pieces on opposite pans of a scale. Rogge's silver needle actually made its side sink. The first years gasped. They hadn't expected his transfiguration to be so advanced. Transfiguration is not mere trickery. At a high level, it can change the nature of things. It's a pity the change reverts when the magic fades. But that is part of its charm. Anyone who doesn't finish before the end of class must write an essay, no less than 2 feet long. Professor McGonagall scanned the room and, satisfied, encouraged them to continue practicing. Besides changing a match into a needle, you might try turning a beetle into a button or a mouse into a snuff box. She had clearly addressed the extra tasks to Rogge and Hermione. Daphne sighed in frustration, her hair a tangled mess. It's so hard. Rogge, can I borrow your notes? Of course. Rogge handed them over without hesitation. Hermione? He waved his notebook at the girl beside him. What do you want? It's because of Professor McGonagall that I'm this good. Rogge admired Hermione. She had outperformed many students from wizarding families by sheer effort. What's that? She gave it to me. You can look. Professor McGonagall cast a quick glance at the podium and said nothing. You're very kind, Rogge said. What are you thinking? He added, shaking his head. Give it back at dinner. This is a Transfiguration Master's notebook. It's a collectible, Daphne teased. Thanks, Sleeping Beauty. Hermione smiled at Rogge, who pretended to be offended as he handed the book over. Daphne laughed. Sleeping Beauty, what a name. I'll tell you in secret. Hermione leaned in and the two girls whispered. Rogge, I definitely won't let you beat me in potions. Hermione, always competitive, issued the challenge. Rogge shrugged. As long as you're happy. Snape isn't about to award points just because of you. His eyes flicked from Hermione to Ron and Harry. With those two academic black holes, no matter how hard you try, it won't be enough. Gryffindor won't lose to you, Hermione insisted, though her expression betrayed worry. Because of Ron and Harry, they had lost 5 points on the first day already. Extrapolated over the year, she didn't know how many points that would mean. Don't stress, just do your best. Rogge was calm. Slytherin had won the House Cup 6 years running, and he suspected the headmaster had already decided to hand it back to someone this term. He would try to earn points for his house, but in the end it would depend on how much face the head of house cared about. Daphne, what time is it? Look. Daphne produced her pocket watch and handed it to him. Rogge examined the delicate timepiece. Being handsome had its perks. Even girls gave him gifts. I'm lending it to you, Daphne said, lowering her voice in mock solemnity. My mum gave it to me. It's very meaningful. The two girls smiled and promptly left Rogge out of their conversation. Hermione, you're amazing, Daphne exclaimed. You've already finished all the first-year textbooks, 8 of them, and they're so thick. You must be the smartest of us, Daphne added. It's nothing. I just read, Hermione replied modestly. The library here is huge. I'm planning to study there after school. Take me with you, Daphne pleaded. My Latin is awful. Okay. Rogge took out a small vial of blue moonlight. Its cool silver-blue glow immediately drew the girls' attention. What potion is that? Hermione asked. Blue moonlight. Rogge had taken his daily dose before class, and the mellow drowsiness it brought now washed over him. Is that what you mentioned this morning? Hermione, have you heard of it? Daphne asked. Hermione shook her head. Hey, don't shout. He's asleep. Hermione motioned for Daphne not to bother him. No wonder you call him Sleeping Beauty. Daphne propped a textbook in front of Rogge and nudged him for good measure. Professor McGonagall glanced at the book covering Rogge. She knew he had finished his assignment and was resting, so she said nothing. When class ended, the two girls tried to rouse him, but he was still standing there, dozing. I learned a spell just for this, Hermione said with a mischievous smile. She'd seen Rogge sleep for hours before. Wingardium Leviosa. Rogge began to float slowly under Hermione's spell. Her magic was draining fast, and she gripped her wand tighter. Oh no, I can't hold him. He's too heavy. The book-warmed sleepiness didn't help. Rogge rose a short distance, then came down hard, striking his head on a desk. He rubbed his forehead and blinked awake. What happened? Why is my head bumped? You fell, and we helped you up, Hermione said, trying to sound calm. Is class over? Rogge looked around. The room had emptied down to the three of them. If we're late, there might not be much left in the Great Hall. That won't do. Let's go. At the word food, Rogge snapped to full alertness. He grabbed his textbook and hurried out. Wait for us. Hermione and Daphne called after him. By the time they reached the Great Hall, most of the main dishes were gone. The Slytherin table in particular had been cleared early. Malfoy and his friends, expecting Rogge to make another sweep, had eaten ahead of time. Yesterday had been the welcome feast. A normal lunch was never as grand. Rogge, why don't you come sit at our Gryffindor table? Hermione worried the small portions wouldn't fill him and invited him along. That's not a good idea. He caught the chilly looks from some Gryffindors and didn't want Hermione to be ostracized. You two go on ahead. I'm going to find the house elves' kitchen. He had been told where the kitchens were before school started, but he hadn't explored the castle much yet and wanted directions. He called to a nearby Hufflepuff girl. Susan, he said. The friendly girl smiled. Oh, Rogge, the one who sleeps standing up. With an appetite like yours, you should come eat with Hufflepuff. Maybe later, Rogge said quickly. His performance the day before had made him well known around school, which he admitted made conversations easier. Do you know where the kitchens are? I'm looking for the house elves. Oh, you're late? Susan glanced toward the Slytherin table and then smiled. Come with me. She led him toward the area directly under the Great Hall. He remembered a house elf had mentioned the kitchen's location before term began, and now Susan's help saved him time. The thought of a proper hot meal made Rogge quicken his steps. Chapter 42, Snape's Preference. The underground corridor was brightly lit, oil paintings lining both sides of the stone walls. As they walked, wooden barrels were stacked against one wall. The Hufflepuffs greeted Rogge cheerfully, tapping the barrels with their wands, without a care that he might learn their secret way into the common room. Do you want to give it a try? Susan asked, pointing at the row of barrels with an expectant look. Rogge hesitated. What happens if I get it wrong? You'll probably get drenched in vinegar, Susan said, covering her mouth to hide a laugh. Our common room doesn't have any grand anti-intruder charms. Are you seriously not going to try? She nudged him. Maybe you'll be the first guest in 1,000 years. Rogge straightened. No, we must respect school rules and not wander into other houses' common rooms. The Hufflepuffs burst into laughter. This was not what they expected from a Slytherin Nermer. Rubbing his stomach, Rogge added, Miss Susan, please take me to the house elves' kitchen. I'm starving. Okay, follow me. She pointed across the room to a painting of fruit. Here, Rogge, make the pear laugh and you'll find the kitchen. Thank you, Miss Susan. Rogge tickled the painted pear. It giggled and transformed into a green doorknob. Mr. Rogge, with a healthy appetite, I wish you a pleasant meal, the doorknob seemed to say. Susan, surprised he'd discovered the method so quickly, tapped a nearby barrel and slipped inside. The kitchen bustled. Dozens of house elves moved with practiced efficiency, preparing ingredients, grilling and stewing. Hufflepuff's founder had brought a group of house elves to Hogwarts, and many of the kitchen elves were their descendants. Welcome, young Master Travis. The elves all bowed when they saw him. A small elf wearing a carrot hat scampered over. Is there anything we can do for you, young Master Travis? You know my name? Rogge asked, surprised. Of course, young Master Travis. Your appetite yesterday gave us the greatest praise. All the house elves at Hogwarts thank you. May I have some food? Rogge asked. He hadn't expected his appetite to have so much effect. Of course, serving you is Juhao's pleasure, the elf said cheerfully. Please give your orders. Grilled meats and some fruit, Rogge named his choice. Juhao hustled to the table and, like a little paddle wheel, filled it with steaming plates. Rogge praised him casually. Well done. And Juhao's eyes filled with tears. For house elves, gratitude from a student was the highest reward. Rogge chewed on a freshly baked lamb chop. The juices burst in his mouth. The meat was tender and satisfying. He ate with relish while Juhao and the others refilled his plate. Half an hour later, a tall stack of empty plates sat at his side. The kitchen elves were stunned. House elves were used to feeding students, but Rogge's appetite, so appreciative, moved them deeply. So happy, Juhao kept bowing. Thank you for your recognition, young Master Travis. This is the best meal I've had, Rogge admitted. Juhao, could you prepare 2 packed lunches for me? Rogge checked his pocket watch. Potions in the dungeons was about to start. Of course, Juhao said, delighted. He packed the food carefully and even set out silver cutlery. Down in the dungeons, Hermione and Daphne glanced around the stone room. Class was about to begin. Where was Rogge? Ron, overhearing, snorted. Rogge from Slytherin is going to be late, the one who never has enough to eat. Hermione shot Ron a glare. How can you say that about him? Why not? Slytherins are. Ron didn't finish. Several Slytherins turned their heads, giving him unfriendly looks. Draco Malfoy smiled faintly, as if waiting for Weasley to finish. The classroom door opened, and Professor Snape swept in. In this class you will not wave your wands about like fools, nor mouth incantations you do not understand, he began, oblivious to the late arrival who had slipped in behind him. In fact, I do not expect many of you to truly grasp. He turned, his dark eyes settling on the sleeping figure at a desk. The precise science and exact art of potion-making. Rogge had slipped into a seat beside Daphne, and under the stern gaze of his head of house, quietly handed the packed lunches to Hermione and Daphne. He then rested his head on the desk and dozed. For the few genuinely gifted, Snape continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can teach you how to bottle fame and even to stop her death. His words were soft, but every student heard them. But then again, some of you may arrive already famous, brimming with confidence and disdainful of instruction. Snape scanned the room, his gaze pausing on Harry Potter and the sleeping Slytherin, and reluctant to listen. He fixed on Harry with particular venom, but couldn't help the brief softening that came when he saw Harry's eyes, so like lilies. Potter, Snape said, his voice low, what do you get if you add powdered asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione snapped her hand up. Slytherin was still leading Gryffindor by 10 points. Snape ignored her. Don't know. Then let's try another. He watched Harry with that mixture of contempt and curiosity he always showed the boy. Potter, if I asked you to find me a bezoar, where would you look? I don't know, sir, Harry answered honestly, a flicker of defiance in his tone. Then tell me, what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? Hermione's hand was aching to be called on. She almost had to be held back by the force of it. But Snape's eyes never left Harry. I see, Snape said coldly. It seems fame does not equate to ability. Professor, Hermione clearly knows, Harry began, irritated, and the class tittered. Quiet! Snape's merciless look swept across them, and silence fell. Snape kept his watchful stare on Harry and on the sleeping Slytherin, deciding, as always, who merited his instruction and who did not. He walked down from the podium, pulled up a chair, and sat directly in front of Harry. Put your hand down, you foolish boy, Snape snapped. Nobody could tell whether staring into Harry's eyes to test the Gryffindor's nerve, or to imagine prying them out and preserving them in a potion. Whatever the reason, Snape was clearly disappointed when Harry met his gaze without flinching. Courage was never in short supply with Harry. If anything, he had too much of it. Professor, that's not fair, Ron protested before Snape could speak again. Why is it that when Slytherin's late, he doesn't lose points? Ron jabbed a thumb toward Rogge, who was sprawled beside Daphne and practically asleep. He even openly sleeps in class, Daphne prodded Rogge, but she already knew he wouldn't wake. Snape rose, his stare cutting into Ron like a knife. Courage without brains is no different from stupidity, he said coldly. Questioning a professor in public, Gryffindor loses 5 points. Snape's verdict sent a ripple of anger through the Gryffindors. Hermione stared at him in disbelief. I refuse, Ron shouted, though his voice shook. I'm not wrong. I don't believe he can answer those 3 questions either. Hermione rolled her eyes. From her knowledge of Rogge, those questions should be child's play. Snape crossed the classroom and sniffed the air near Rogge. I detect dragon's blood and moonlight dew, he announced, then murmured a quick spell. Revitalize. He transferred a little of his own energy into the sleeping boy. Rogge. To Daphne's surprise, Rogge blinked awake. Is class over? He asked, looking around until he noticed Snape watching him. Snape's expression was thunderous. Rogge, startled, thought to himself that Snape's dislike for Harry must be running especially deep. Snape repeated the 3 questions he'd asked earlier. What is the floriography of the daffodil and the mugwort? If you add powdered daffodil root to an infusion of mugwort, what potion do you get? What is a bezoar and where might you find one? And finally, what is the difference between aconite and wolfsbane? Hermione frowned at the mention of flower language. Why should potion making involve petals and symbolism? Rogge, rubbing sleep from his eyes, gave the answers clearly enough. The daffodil signifies love, mugwort symbolizes pain. Powdered daffodil root added to mugwort yields an extremely potent sleeping draught, the draught of living death. A bezoar is an antidote. You can find one in a cow's stomach. As for aconite and wolfsbane, there is no practical difference. Both are slender, upright, poisonous perennials. Their flowers can be used in potions, while their leaves are highly toxic. Snape's face remained sullen at first, then he straightened and pronounced, "Slytherin gains 5 points." He gave no public rebuke. Rogge yawned and looked entirely unaffected. Daphne beamed. "Rogge, you're amazing," she whispered. Ron's expression turned frog green at the perfect answer. He bristled at Snape's favoritism, but remembering the warnings from his brothers, he didn't dare press the issue further. The first-year potions lesson was simple, basics only, and after Snape finished explaining how to prepare materials and use the cauldron, the class was to brew a potion for treating boils. Dried nettles, crushed snake fangs, slugs. Almost every student fumbled through it and earned Snape's scorn, everyone except Malfoy and Rogge. Snape ignored Rogge entirely, instead standing behind Malfoy to demonstrate the perfect method. Bored, Rogge rested his head on the table and, out of habit, propped himself up with his left hand. With a casual flick of his wand, the simple boil potion sat finished beside him. Daphne sniffed. Partnering with Rogge had seemed like a good idea at first. Now she wished she'd done it herself. "You're not allowed to do it this time." "I want to." A sharp hissing noise cut through the room. Seamus's cauldron was bubbling an acidic green and smoking. Someone had taken it off the fire, but the reaction kept going. "Oh, Neville must have forgotten the porcupine quills," someone muttered, and the cauldron reacted fiercely, shrink-wrapping itself and collapsing into a charred ball that dropped to the floor and splattered its contents everywhere. Neville was drenched, covered in burns and blisters. His cries of pain echoed across the dungeon. Rogge eyed him and sighed. Poor fellow, Neville was never suited to this class. Potions required precision. A single slip could ruin the whole brew. Snape barked at Seamus. "What are you standing there for? Send him to the infirmary." He swept his wand to clear the spilled potion from the floor. "Look, some of you have finished, and you can't even use a cauldron properly." As usual, Snape made examples of the Gryffindors. He then turned to Rogge. "Next class, you will partner with Neville." He glared at Harry. "Why didn't you remind them?" Gryffindor lost a point. Harry did not need a reason to be targeted by Snape. The teacher's animosity seemed to require no justification. Harry split his irritation into thirds between Snape and Malfoy, with a sliver left over for the troublesome Rogge who'd unknowingly drawn Snape's notice. When the bell rang, the students rushed for the dungeon doorway like prisoners liberated. "Rogge Travis, stay behind," Snape called faintly. Daphne and Hermione shot him sympathetic looks and mouthed a cheerful if nervous wave goodbye. Snape sat back at his desk and wrote on a piece of parchment without looking up. "Dragon's blood and moonlight dew," he said aloud. "The only potion that uses both at once, blue moonlight." Rogge looked at him with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "You guessed right, Professor," he muttered inwardly, annoyed by Snape's scent-detecting remark. "If that's the case, why did you revitalize me? Do you think sleeping in class is appropriate?" Snape asked coldly. Rogge had to admit he dozed off, although he felt lucky just to have made it to class at all. "No," he said, shrugging. "It was wrong." Snape's tone turned almost commanding. "The blue moonlight formula is widely available, but few wizards can produce it properly. Take it out. Let me see." Rogge pulled the vial from his cloak. The silver-blue liquid inside shimmered like moonlight. Even Rogge's fingers tingled to look at it. Snape's scrutiny softened into a rare, grudging praise. "Extremely high quality," he said. He tossed back his shoulder-length hair and kept his gaze locked between the potion and Rogge. Then he pushed a 4-foot-long sheet of parchment toward him. It was filled with questions, Snape's handwritten test. "Do it," Snape ordered. Roger returned to his seat with a quill, pausing now and then to think. In his opinion, this exam was harder than the ordinary fifth-year wizarding ordinary levels. Every question seemed to be above owl standard, some even bordering on newt-level difficulty. There were no beginner potions questions at all. It opened at intermediate and climbed into advanced material and freeform potion development. If an intermittent confusion potion suddenly turns deep green after the seventh stir, what might be the cause, and how would you correct it? If you had to design a potion to enhance memory, which 3 herbs would you choose and why? Explain why mimosa must be harvested in stormy weather. Briefly describe your vision for the future of potions. Roger glanced up at the podium. Professor Snape stood there, brewing as if no one else existed. Snape clearly regarded blue moonlight as something Roger had invented himself, and he was using the exam as a way to judge his skill. All essay questions, all traps, Snape was making it hard on purpose. Roger could have handed in a blank sheet and still learned more from Snape. The man was a living archive, a true potions master, quiet in his casting, an inventor of spells. The temptation to impress was almost childlike. He worked until 8. The memory questions were straightforward. He answered them confidently. But when the exam demanded practical application, Roger could only draw on what he'd learned brewing Blue Moonlight. The final prompt asked about the future of potions. He rolled his eyes inwardly. Those were questions for masters, but he still wrote an answer. Most magical tools are steeped in tradition and have stagnated for 1,000 years. Introducing Muggle scientific methods and instruments into potion research could bring about a revolution. Professor, I'm done. Roger handed in his paper. Snape's potion was nearing completion. What are the uses of dragonvine seeds, thunderbird feathers, and powdered unicorn horn? Snape asked, tilting the golden potion in his hand and reaching for Roger's bottle. Dragonvine seeds come from tropical volcanoes and fruit once every 100 years. They're used to extract fiery essence and can be an ingredient in soul-cleansing potions, Roger answered. Thunderbird feathers, from birds that live in storm-racked areas, stimulate mental power. The ashes of burned feathers are used in spirit potions, he continued. Powdered unicorn horn enhances cognition. Potions with it are said to unlock obscure regions of the mind. He watched, heart-pounding, as Snape opened the lid of his blue moonlight and dripped a thread of his golden brew into it. Roger's stomach dropped. Mixing finished potions is a master's gambit. You only do it to your own work. Touching another's brew almost always ruins it and can produce dangerous results. Snape's face remained impassive as he observed the bottle. The silver-blue liquid of blue moonlight accepted the golden thread, and instead of collapsing, the two currents wound together in a luminous spiral. Roger forgot to breathe. He had never seen such a reaction, a tiny, perfect universe forming in glass. This, Roger whispered, staring at Snape, the golden spirit potion and blue moonlight, when combined, counteract blue moonlight's drowsiness, Snape said. Call it tranquil starlight. He handed the bottle back, satisfied. New side effects? You'll carry more static on your body, if that counts. Snape shrugged, tossed the bottle to Roger, and began grading the exam. He glanced up now and then, somewhat surprised. The answers had gaps and errors, but they showed a solid foundation and practical instincts. So you only know Blue Moonlight? Snape read the last page, his confusion sharpening. Roger nodded. Practicing only advanced potions, your stupidity equals a troll's, Snape said, sarcastic. Professor, you should know my history, Roger said helplessly. Those abominable dementors at Azkaban almost froze my magical growth. I couldn't buy anything in Diagon Alley, so I had to make my own. Without it, I would have been behind even first years. Abominable, Snape repeated, pausing. An interesting word. I doubt many in the magical world would use it for dementors, apart from you. He pulled a thick notebook from a shelf, pages full of recipes and brewing notes he'd collected through the years. Follow the order in this book. Submit 1 potion every 3 days. He said it flatly. He had never been one to hoard information from true talent. With that moonlight dew smell about you, I imagine you won't be short of money to buy ingredients. Snape rolled the parchment and put it in a drawer. Roger sniffed instinctively. Professor, doesn't moonlight dew lose its scent after 3 breaths once it's opened? Use your head. Where would it go? Snape snapped. It doesn't vanish into nothing. It disperses into the air, or it's absorbed elsewhere. Roger nodded, still curious that Snape seemed to detect it at all, but the professor offered no further explanation and waved him away. Snape turned over the last answer in his head. Revolution? He disliked the term. A pureblood leaning toward Muggle methods, a half-blood trying to measure up to purebloods. Revolution. Thoroughly Slytherin. The Slytherin ideal had never been about blood purity alone, but about ambition and power. For it, any price could be paid. Professor! Roger suddenly stuck his head back through the doorway. Is there anywhere in the school I can brew? He meant the room of requirement. Snape thought a moment and gave instructions. Opposite the tapestry of the ballet dancers, on the 8th floor, walk back and forth 3 times. As Roger's footsteps faded, Snape stood silently for a long time. Roger's talent in both potions and spellwork reminded him of his own younger days. Even more unsettling was the faint pattern he saw in Roger's rapport with the Gryffindors. Snape shook his head. He would not allow his past to replay itself in a student. The great hall was empty. Roger looked at the spotless long tables and, with little choice, headed for the kitchens again. The effects of the dragon blood lingered. His skin prickled, his hair had a slight sheen, and a faint ozone tang hung in the air around him. He tightened his cloak against the lingering tremor as he slipped toward the house elves' domain. Chapter 45, Room of Requirement. Travis's appetite was as healthy as it had been that afternoon, and all the house elves in the kitchen fussed over him happily. Ju-Hao. Yes, young Master Travis. Ju-Hao bounded forward, eyes bright. What do you command? Are there any secret passages in Hogwarts? Travis asked. Ju-Hao faltered. He snatched up a frying pan and began thumping his head with it. Ju-Hao knows the answer but can't tell. Ju-Hao is a bad house elf. He kept muttering and hitting his head. All right, I was just asking casually. Travis tried to stop him. Ju-Hao didn't seem to hear and continued his self-punishment. Enough, bring the food. Travis slammed the table. The elf immediately stopped and began serving. Prepare some dinner for me and send it to Professor Snape, Travis added. If he asks, tell him it's to cover potion expenses. Yes, young Master Travis. Ju-Hao brightened at the task and hurried off. On the 8th floor, Travis found the tapestry Snape had mentioned. It was a square nearly 4 meters across, centered on the wall. 6 trolls in tutus and ballet slippers held bone clubs of various sizes in a clearing ringed by fruit trees. In the middle stood a wizard labeled Barnabas, trying and failing to teach them ballet, then being pummeled by those bone clubs. Travis felt for the poor Barnabas. Decades of getting battered for sport were not something to enjoy. I need a room where I can brew potions, Travis muttered, pacing the corridor. On his 3rd pass, a smooth stone door materialized in the wall. His eyes lit up. He pushed it open. Inside was a bright, roomy space with a sturdy workbench at its center. Cauldrons, test tubes, and neatly labeled instruments lined the bench. Potion books sat on shelves. Travis breathed out. What a perfect place. How could anyone destroy this? He couldn't shake the thought of fiendfire years from now, when this room would be consumed. A faint caption floated in his mind, mechanical and clinical, independent space detected, can be connected to the system. Connecting. An urgent message blocked it. Warning, blocked by abnormal power, insufficient energy. Travis started. He hadn't installed any such interface. Could the transmigration have altered something? The error told him something else too. Hogwarts was warded by magical powers that even whatever this panel was couldn't override. Far away in the headmaster's office, Dumbledore paused in his knitting. He frowned and felt the echo of interference, an attack or an intrusion on the room of requirement. The strange power receded as quickly as it had appeared. Nothing had been harmed. Dumbledore opened the door, stared at the featureless stone for a moment, lifted his half-moon spectacles, and considered before shaking his head and leaving. Travis flipped through the notebook Snape had given him. Scab-healing potions, neutralizers, Felix Felicis, Veritaserum, even polyjuice potion recipes. Choosing Slytherin was a wise move, he murmured, jotting down ingredients for the first brew. Collecting rare items from the Forbidden Forest was out of the question, especially with Lord Voldemort's presence. He'd have Sailor buy what he needed. If it could be solved with money, why risk it? If you don't have the Savior's life, don't try to do the Savior's work, he warned himself. Carrying the books, he left the room of requirement and nearly collided with Dumbledore. "Oh, hello, Headmaster." Travis straightened. "Travis, how good to see you," Dumbledore said with a smile. "Impressive you found the room of requirement on your second day." "Professor Snape told me," Travis said, picturing the potions master's deadpan expression. "Definitely the sort of thing Snape would do." Dumbledore chuckled. "It is difficult to find. Once I myself needed the lavatory in a hurry and took a wrong turn. Guess what was inside?" "A lavatory?" Travis laughed. "I wanted a place to brew potions, and it conjured a workbench for me." "If the headmaster was desperate for a lavatory, then it must have been just that," Dumbledore laughed. "Wrong. A room full of chamber pots." Travis smiled. His headmaster had some rather unusual experiences. "Would you like to come to my office for a moment? I have some very good lemon sherbet." A brief mental prompt flickered through Travis's head, like a simulated outcome assessment, and then he saw the options. 1. Agree and go to Dumbledore's office. 2. Dumbledore accidentally uses legilimency and sees a blank, becomes suspicious thinking you have a clumency. 3. You suffer a magical accident and must take a year off from school. Simulation stopped. Travis hastily declined. "I'll be late. Filch will catch me." He held up his pocket watch apologetically. "Very well. It is getting late," Dumbledore said, glancing at the watch. "See you, Travis." "See you, Headmaster." After Dumbledore rounded the corner, he murmured to himself, "Travis is unique, especially after what he's already been through." He thought of how hard it was for some children to live a normal life at all, and of Neville, the boy who often worried at his core. Still, had Snape been right to let the boy into the room of requirement so quickly? Dumbledore would watch him more closely. Travis's ability to conjure an expecto patronum suggested he wasn't hopeless. Perhaps he simply craved power. Dumbledore's expression softened and grew guarded at once. Outside the main building, Travis exhaled in relief. "Magic accident? Yeah, right, old man. You're wicked," he muttered. Under the watchful eyes of Filch and Madame Norris, he slipped back to Slytherin just in time. "Good night, Mr. Filch." "Good night, Madame Norris," Travis called, giving Filch a graceful wave. "Humph. You won't be so lucky next time," Filch sniffed. He glared at the Slytherin entrance, scooped up his cat, and resumed his rounds, convinced the boy had been mocking him. He had a long night ahead, patrolling corridors, dealing with mischief, and that infernal Peeves. Filch turned his head to glare once more at the Slytherin passage as Travis entered. The boy was on his blacklist now. "Rogge, you're finally back." Daphne jumped up when she saw him, all relief. "I was worried Professor would." She made a quick cutting motion with her hand and grinned. "Diffindo." "How is that possible?" Rogge shrugged. Of course he wasn't going to admit Snape had kept him behind for a test. That would be too pathetic. "The headmaster saw my exceptional potion talent and burst into tears, begging me to accept his gift." Rogge didn't hesitate. "You should have seen his face. I still get goosebumps thinking about it." "See?" He produced a vial that shimmered with a golden halo. "He even worried about my studies and personally improved the blue moonlight. Now it's called Serene Starlight." "Really?" Daphne studied the vial with a skeptical tilt of her head. "Since when was the headmaster so dramatic, crying and pleading like that?" "Of course it's true," Rogge insisted, with the straightest face he could muster. "When I drink it, there's no drowsy side effect at all." Daphne pressed her luck. "And the headmaster's gift? I put it in my secret base." That was enough to send Daphne into puffed-up curiosity. Before starting at Hogwarts, she'd heard the castle had secret passages and hidden rooms even some professors didn't know about. Take me to see it." "Shh," Rogge wagged a finger. "Tomorrow. I don't want Filch catching us." "Deal." Daphne handed back Professor McGonagall's notes. "We didn't see you all afternoon. Hermione made me promise to return these to you." "Oh, did you go study Latin?" Rogge noticed the pile of brick-thick dictionaries on the table and with mock gravity added, "You can bring them back after you've finished reading every last page." "By the way, Malfoy's been sniffing around." Daphne looked worried. "You know the rivalry between Slytherin and Gryffindor. Sometimes it's like they're sworn enemies. Let him be." Rogge waved off the concern. "Draco is Draco. Malfoy is Malfoy. Slytherin will be Slytherin." "I get that," Daphne said slowly, "but after you showed off so much today, Draco looks like he's planning something." The perils of being excellent and handsome," Rogge sighed dramatically, then brightened. Don't forget your transfiguration essay is due, a 2-foot-long essay. Good luck. Daphne watched him go, balling a fist as she wished she could clobber him with one of the dictionaries. Over the next few days, Malfoy didn't make a move against Rogge. He spent his energy arguing with Harry instead. It got to the point where Rogge wondered whether arguing might actually be healthier for them. Rogge did keep his word and showed Daphne the room of requirement. It could become anything she imagined. When she heard the conditions Rogge had to endure, she winced. 1 potion every 3 days? That sounded like a cruel punishment. Aside from brewing potions, Rogge had a new project, a magical instant camera. Current wizarding cameras were bulky and their flash had to be held by hand. All the magical photos he'd seen were black and white. Why should magical photography be stuck in monochrome? It's not stealing artists' jobs, Rogge muttered as he disassembled a magical camera, laying parts carefully on the room of requirements wall. The Leica R3 Jessica had helpfully bought had also arrived, delivered by Sailor. The classic red Leica logo was unmistakable. Rogge stripped it down to learn from a proven design. He planned to change the camera body colors, coffee silver, and add a moving, gleaming magical logo. This was a magical instant camera, not some muggle cast-off. The handle had to be Himalayan white birch, light and strong. The lens mount would be pure silver, anti-slip, and shock-absorbing. Diamond lenses, dragonhide straps, a silver casing. If it could be arranged, he would arrange it. An authentic, handcrafted look, very stylish. What would the basic version cost? At least 2,000. No, fewer. Only 9 galleons. People don't buy the basic version, Rogge lectured himself aloud. You sell the image of prestige. Those who can afford 9 galleons will pay more for upgrades. Lenses would be offered in 11 grades. The external hot shoe flash would support at least 6 types. The basic body might be sold as a blank canvas. Buyers would then pay for anti-modification charms, built-in flash, and a mood-sensitive color-shifting shell as upgrades. Film and developing fluid would be sold as consumables, 1 sickle per set. That's where the steady money would come from. He'd hold a monthly magical photography exhibition with prizes starting at 30 galleons. Autofocus, his motto, he declared, would be not automatic, but artisanal, manual focus for the old masters. Then he froze. But how do I make the film and the developing fluid? The moving picture nature of magical photographs made Muggle instant film useless as a template. This was the core problem. Rogge went straight to Hermione and Ileana for help. 3 heads are better than 1, after all. On a Thursday morning in late October, the first years buzzed with excitement. It was their first flying class. Daphne shook the unusually calm Rogge. Rogge, a broomstick. Don't you know about Quidditch? Quidditch, Rogge frowned. I don't really get why wizards are so into that sport. How can you not like it? Daphne gasped. It's the most famous sport in the wizarding world. Teams flying on broomsticks, chasing the quaffle, and the golden snitch. Just thinking about it is thrilling. Flying? Rogge made a face. The sight of wizards swooping about on brooms always made him uneasy. It reminded him too closely of flying things he'd known before, things that had left him with bad feelings. He took a breath to steady himself. Daphne didn't read much into it. Flying is a compulsory course for every first year, she said brightly. You'll be fine. Across from them, Draco Malfoy had heard that Rogge had never ridden a broom and immediately launched into boasting. First years can't try out for the house Quidditch teams yet, he complained loudly. My dad bought me a Comet 260, and if I could make the team, I'd show you a real Nimbus 2000. Nimbus 2000? The Slytherins nearest him leaned in, even Prefect Marcus. Malfoy preened. It's the latest from Nimbus, mahogany, top of the line. That's a pro-level Quidditch broom. Real seekers use them, he said with a smug tilt. If I made the team, I'd bring mine, and you'd see what a Nimbus 2000 really looks like, he boasted. Crabbe and Goyle eyed him hungrily. Can we touch it? You can, Malfoy snapped. Last time I was flying, I nearly collided with a Muggle airplane. They're noisy, ugly things, he added with a sniff. They even stuck my broom in a bookcase lock once. All around the longhouse tables, children from wizarding families traded tall tales about broomstick adventures, flying through the mouth of a lake monster, zooming past a weather cloud, and Slytherin and Gryffindor bickered over which was the better Quidditch team. If the Ravenclaw table hadn't separated them, they might have come to blows. Sailor swooped over the commotion and landed in front of Rogge. Chapter 47. Conflict between purebloods. Harry, why did Hedwig fly to Rogge? Ron asked, bewildered as the white shape swept past. For more than a month since term began, Travis Rogge had become the teacher's go-to student for answers. Whenever a tricky question came up, the professors would turn to him, and he always answered perfectly, earning praise and house points. Because he was a Slytherin, Ron was even more convinced he was destined to become some kind of dark wizard and was starting to view Hermione as a traitor for being friendly with him. He had, however, forgotten one thing. Travis never raised his hand in class. No, that wasn't Hedwig. Harry remembered vaguely that the woman he'd seen on the train had also said her son kept a snowy owl. The white bird that had passed them probably belonged to someone else. What's happening? Daphne leaned over, curious at the excited look on Rogue's face. The flash-developing potion can be mass-produced, Rogge announced, hardly able to contain himself. That's brilliant. So we'll finally have an instant camera? Daphne's eyes lit up. She had grown tired of the bulky, old-fashioned Muggle cameras and the long, tedious process of developing photos. From the beginning of the month, under Professor Snape's guidance, they had discovered that Silverfrost's solution had a developing effect. After 2 weeks of repeated trials and refinements, they'd finally created something new, the Flash Developing Potion. Drop it onto a photo, and the image would appear immediately. They'd also worked together to invent a double-layer magic photo paper. The outer layer was coated with a black negative. The inner layer was a white, absorbent sheet. After a picture was taken, the white paper would absorb the potion, and the image would instantly form there, a moving, living magical photo. Once the image stabilized, the white layer could be peeled away, leaving the black negative for preservation. Rogge had always thought the negative unnecessary. Wizards had Geminio and Gorgio and plenty of other spells, so why bother? But Hermione and Ileana had been firm. A camera without a negative had no soul. In the end, Rogge had given in and agreed to make the paper two-layered. Mass-producing the flash-developing potion, however, was a different problem. As a key consumable for the business they hoped to start, large-scale production couldn't be handled the way he brewed small batches in a cauldron. Rogge couldn't drop out of school to brew all day, and he didn't trust anyone else with the formula. After much thought, he decided to improve the recipe. The letter from Sailor had contained Jessica's test results, and the revised formula finally worked. By following this method, the flash-developing potion, more accurately a flash-developing tincture, could now be prepared in large quantities, cheaply and reliably. All problems are solved, Rogge said, happy and relieved. An old technology was finally about to be modernized under his hands. If Professor Snape hadn't pointed out Silverfrost's solution's developing properties, I never would have thought of it. And thank you, Greengrass family, for supplying so many materials, Rogge added, raising his glass toward Daphne. You're too kind. I only helped send the letter, Daphne said, lowering her head and clinking glasses with him shyly. Tell Ileana and Hermione quickly. They'll be thrilled. Under Rogue's influence, Daphne had gradually learned to accept non-pureblood witches and wizards. Although her standards for friends remained strict, they had to have noble blood or be as sharp and exceptional as Hermione. If it weren't for those two know-it-alls helping find information, this wouldn't have gone so smoothly, Rogge admitted. I wouldn't dare call Hermione a know-it-all anymore, Daphne said with a mock sniff. Rogge smiled and made his way to the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor tables with his drink. Through Ileana, he'd corresponded with her father, Alexander Greengrass, discussing current affairs at the Soviet Ministry of Magic. Though international ministries all agreed wizards should remain hidden from Muggles, high-ranking Muggles and wizards couldn't help but influence one another. Events like the fall of Hitler and Grindelwald's imprisonment had threads that crossed both worlds. The little test in the financial district before school began had only been a warm-up. Rogue's true ambition was to deal with the Soviet ministry's library, home to a large number of forbidden books. He wanted to liberate those books into his own study. Hogwarts's library was ancient and rich, but under Dumbledore's watch, he didn't think he could study the darker arts without drawing attention. "Ileana, thank you for your help," he said, handing her the letter. "It worked! That's amazing!" Ileana jumped up, excited. "You'll have to give me one when they're ready." "No problem. You'll get a share of the shop's profits," Rogge promised, clinking glasses with her. "Has your father heard anything new about Eastern Europe?" "He hasn't replied yet. He said to wait and see." Ileana's face showed a hint of worry. "But it's fine. We can wait a little longer." Rogge nodded. When the Kremlin's flag changed, the Soviet Ministry of Magic wouldn't stay calm for long. Chaos, he thought darkly, was a ladder to progress. Meanwhile, Hermione, who had never really been exposed to Quidditch, was reading aloud from Quidditch Through the Ages to fit in, and the younger students were groaning, bored by the dry rules and silently willing her to stop. "Rogge, the rules are so odd," Hermione complained quietly to him. "If catching the golden snitch ends the game immediately, what happens if someone catches it right at the start? Wouldn't the match be over before it began?" Everyone around breathed a quiet sigh of relief that Rogge had arrived to break the monotony, even if he was, to some, an even more annoying Slytherin. "You have a point, Hermione," Rogge said with a smile, though his eyes flicked toward Harry, and he thought to himself that in a few days Harry wouldn't see it that way anymore. "Our instant camera is ready for sale," Rogge announced to the group. "My mother has already verified the mass production method. It's feasible." "Really?" Hermione sprang up, eager. "Let me see. How did you think to use that purity-decreasing method for mass production?" "Shh." Rogge held up a hand. "Bruslar. That's our trade secret." Hermione clapped a hand over her mouth at once. The core of the flash-developing potion had to stay confidential. At that moment, Draco Malfoy appeared out of nowhere and snatched the reddened Remembrall from Neville's hand. "Malfoy, give that back to Neville." Harry and Ron leapt to their feet, glare sharp and immediate. Travis, Rogue's first name, gave a mocking smile. "Mr. Malfoy, what an eye-opener. Is this the famous honor of the House of Malfoy?" He taunted, contempt clear in his look. "Even if your family's way is to grovel to the powerful and pick on the weak, you are still a Slytherin. Do try not to sully the house's reputation." "Travis, our family's honor doesn't need your meddling," Malfoy shot back, his long-standing dislike of Rogge flaring into open hostility. Rogge turned his attention to Neville, who was flustered and frightened. "Neville," he said quietly but firmly, "if something's taken from you, you should stand up for yourself." If Neville couldn't muster that courage, Rogge thought he would keep being targeted. Hermione opened her mouth to intercede, but Percy grabbed her arm and pulled her back. He'd already warned his younger siblings to stay out of it. The Weasleys would not get involved in this quarrel, not even if it seemed, on the surface, like nothing more than a spat among the younger students. Chapter 48, Dumbledore's Worries. Silence fell over the Great Hall. Every pair of eyes turned toward the confrontation. Professor McGonagall had clearly meant to step in, but something had reached her quietly, and she simply stood by the door, watching. Gregory Goyle and Vincent Crabbe flanked Malfoy. At the same time, Daphne Greengrass moved to Rogge's side, meeting the other party's gaze without flinching. The numbers were 3-2. Malfoy looked to have the advantage. At that moment, Prefect Marcus Flint bellowed out of turn, "What do you think you're doing?" He didn't want a house quarrel exposed for all to see. Such public feuding would make them a laughingstock. He barked the reprimand, flashing his large front teeth with an irritated snarl. "Fighting over something as stupid as this for an insignificant person?" Rogge turned and fixed Marcus with a cold, deliberate stare that made the air between them tense. He wasn't the sort to be cowed. "Those who aren't taking sides, return to your seats," he said, his voice authoritative and admonishing, as if he himself were a prefect. Marcus glanced at the assembled students, and the nature of the dispute suddenly became clear to him. This was not merely childish bickering, but a clash of pure-blood families masquerading as schoolyard taunts. He went back to his place at the long table without another word. The Flints chose not to get involved. Perhaps they found the whole scene beneath their notice. Several Slytherins exchanged approving glances, faint sneers tugging at their mouths, an unmistakable "we told you so." Marcus, feeling his authority dented, thumped the table in a display of forced anger to cover his discomfort. "Travis, look at who you're defending," Malfoy sneered, shoving Neville. "He had his things pinched by me and didn't even make a peep." "Come on, Neville. If you'll only shout, 'Longbottom is a coward,' I'll throw your rubbish back at you," Malfoy taunted. A friend from the Gryffindor table leaned over and murmured, "Neville, stand up." The encouragement was barely audible. Rogge swept Neville with a contemptuous glance. "It seems whatever bravery the Longbottoms had has completely gone," he said, and began to turn away. Seeing Rogge leave, Malfoy crowed louder, "You've even forgotten how to spell courage now." Neville suddenly straightened. "Malfoy, give me back my Remembrall," he yelled, voice cracking in the effort. It sounded comically high and furious all at once. Malfoy paused, taken aback. He hadn't expected Neville to answer back, let alone shout. The cry landed like a slap. "Give it back," Neville repeated. Malfoy's face darkened. He tossed the Remembrall toward Neville and slunk out of the hall. Clap, clap, clap. The Gryffindor table erupted into applause. The students cheered for Neville. Brave Neville had stood up to Malfoy. The noise was vigorous but brief. Rogge's next words struck like a hammer and stopped it cold. "The Weasleys' courage is always either recklessly overblown or conveniently absent," Rogge said, turning his scorn on Percy. "As a prefect, you don't even measure up to Marcus. He at least knows how to defend his house, while you make excuses to hide your own cowardice." Marcus's expression shifted. Was that praise or insult? Either way, anything that dented Gryffindor's pride pleased him. Rogge let his gaze sweep over the Weasley table where Harry, Ron, and Seamus sat, 3 of Neville's roommates. "This is just the sort of quarrel pureblood families use as cover," he said, contemplatively. "If anyone wants to avoid things escalating, perhaps they should follow Lord Voldemort's example and purge us." The name had the effect Rogge intended. Several students went pale. The forbidden name hung in the air, and the Slytherins' faces tightened with a mixture of fear and fascination. To speak it aloud was to test the limits of courage. "What? Scared?" Rogge continued, deliberately goading the Gryffindors. "Compared to Grindelwald, who wrought ruin in the islands, does that other fellow even deserve to be called Dark Lord?" "You know who is dead," someone from the Gryffindor table said quickly. Rogge snorted. "Ah, and yet you still won't say his name," he mocked. "So much for Gryffindor bravery. In my view, it's quite ordinary." Dinner dissolved afterward into an uneasy hush. Students drifted away, the Slytherins making an early departure. The incident deepened the rift between the houses. Later, in Professor McGonagall's office, she asked Dumbledore, puzzled and a little annoyed, "Albus, why didn't you step in? Malfoy bullying Neville is not something the students should have to sort out themselves." Dumbledore's face had gone thoughtful. "That boy, Rogge, he said you know whose name, and even brought up Grindelwald. Hearing those names together unsettles me." He hesitated, then added, "Forgive me, Minerva. I am curious about Rogge. He surprised me the first time I encountered him." "How did Professor Snape introduce him to you?" McGonagall asked. "Talented, uncommonly so," Dumbledore answered, looking at her. "What do you make of him?" "Humble, steady, and extraordinarily gifted," McGonagall agreed, echoing Snape's assessment. "Of all the students I have taught, those with that level of natural ability usually go on to make a name for themselves in the magical world. But compared to them, Rogge," she chose her words as if weighing them carefully. "How to put it, he's lethargic at times. It's hard to find the right word." "He's not as proactively driven as Hermione," she went on with a little sigh. "He only applies himself to what interests him. That's the consensus among the staff. We hardly ever hear from him unless he's asked," she added. "The first-year classes are beneath him. They waste his time. On that point, even Miss Granger falls short." Dumbledore glanced out the window. "I rather wish he'd break the occasional school rule, like other Slytherins do," he said softly. McGonagall, who prided herself on discipline, could not help but agree. "Slytherin admires strength above all. I fear Rogge will eclipse Malfoy and become one of the house's central figures. His wand core is unicorn hair," she continued. "Ollivander says the wand chooses the wizard. If that is so," Dumbledore cut in gently, "I understand your concern." The mention of the unicorn's choice stirred memories in him that were both familiar and distant. He sighed. Minerva, on the surface, this morning's skirmish was simply Malfoy taking Neville's Remembrall. What, then, was it really about? His expression grew heavy. On the one hand, he had to curb those family forces that prized pure-blood supremacy. On the other, he knew such deep-seated beliefs could not be undone overnight. Pure-blood elitism had been woven into the fabric of the wizarding world for generations, and no single generation could be expected to eradicate it. Chapter 49. The Broom That Cannot Scream. The conflict between Roger and Malfoy is more like a metaphor for the future. Dumbledore unrolled a sheet of parchment, one of Snape's test papers, and sighed. This boy has revolutionary ideas. Unlike Tom, he wants to remake the magical world by borrowing from Muggles, though I don't think that's necessary. But it worries me all the same. Dumbledore's gaze drifted to the lawn outside the window where the younger students spoke. Flying lesson was just beginning. Lord Voldemort still lurks in the shadows. Another ideology is taking root beneath the surface. As you said, the Chillin Wand has chosen him. Professor McGonagall was quiet a moment before she spoke. Albus, at least we found it. Roger, like any child, has the right to form his own values, even if they seem immature now. It's the school's duty to help them grow into something healthier. Well, our Mr. Roger doesn't seem very promising at Quidditch, Dumbledore remarked, watching Madame Hooch lead the class. The late afternoon sun warmed the green pitch. Madame Hooch paced between two lines of students. Identical, worn brooms lay at their feet. Up, Harry said, and his broom leapt into his hand as if it had been waiting for the command. Madame Hooch nodded with approval. Harry seemed born for Quidditch. Up, other pupils shouted, trying to coax their brooms, but none matched Harry's ease. Quidditch depends on talent. Perhaps Harry can join the team next year, Madame Hooch said, half laughing. Roger, why won't your broom move? Daphne peered at him. Roger's broom was rooted to the ground as if nailed there. No calling would stir it. Roger spread his hands and looked around helplessly. Malfoy had been second best to Roger in almost every class since the start of term. That persistent feeling of being outranked made him relish this small victory. Today he had managed to get his broom to him before Roger. He held it with a little more pride and shot Roger a provocative look. Roger wanted to retort, but didn't. At last, after a few minutes, everyone else had their brooms. Only Roger's remained stubbornly still, an aloof thing refusing his invitation. Brooms take the feeling in your command, Madame Hooch called. Put some heart into it, children. Some people are just not born to fly, Malfoy sneered. Ron, nursing a fresh red mark from a broom hit, smirked in schadenfreude. Even Harry sniggered. Laughter spread across the line. Roger shrugged. He didn't seem to mind the teasing. Maybe your broom's broken, Roger said lightly. Madame Hooch came over and tried a soft summoning. The broom that had ignored Roger floated up and settled into her hand as if obeying a friend. The class laughed even louder. Perhaps you haven't put enough feeling into it, Madame Hooch said, baffled. In all her years of teaching, she'd never seen anything quite like this. Any feeling will do? Roger asked. Of course, joy, anger, firm determination, she explained. A flying broom is not just a tool, it's a wizard's companion. If your feeling is strong enough, it will follow your thought. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and call it with full emotion. Roger's voice dropped, and when he spoke, it was cold. Rise, or I'll burn you. The edge in his tone carried a chill. An oppressive presence seemed to radiate from him. The other students shivered. Even Madame Hooch's expression shifted. The broom, which had ignored him moments ago, floated up at once. It steadied in the air and settled into Roger's hand, perfectly obedient. Madame Hooch and the others exchanged astonished glances. Roger's idea of full of emotion was, evidently, something else entirely. Thank you for your guidance, Madame Hooch, Roger said, and a gentle, almost boyish smile softened his face. The earlier coldness vanished as if it had never been. Madame Hooch sighed and walked to the center of the line. Now everyone, mount your brooms. Hold on tight and don't slide off. When I blow the whistle, push off, ascend, and find your balance. When I blow again, lean forward and land steadily. She lifted the whistle at her throat and counted 3, 2, beep. The whistle barely left her lips before Neville's broom shot into the air and rocketed upward. First-rate reaction speed, Roger called down, half in admiration. Neville's broom spun him up and away in a wild, panicked arc. making Madame Hooch's wand work difficult. He veered toward the forbidden forest. The statue on the roof flicked its spear and managed to hook his robe, reeling him back for a moment. The broom, however, surged higher and finally carried Neville away toward the trees. The robe couldn't take the strain and ripped with a loud tear. Neville screamed as he fell. Wingardium Leviosa! Roger thrust his wand, and the falling Neville froze in midair. The spell held, but Roger's magic drained rapidly. "So heavy," he muttered, and though he tried to ease Neville down, the boy still thudded to the ground. Lessen the impact, but not softly. Madame Hooch dashed over, guilt written on her face. Thanks to Roger's quick work, Neville was shaken but unhurt. "I'll take him to the hospital wing," Madame Hooch said, supporting Neville. "All of you stay put. Put your brooms away. If I catch anyone flying without permission again, you'll be expelled." "Madame Hooch should give you extra points," Daphne said indignantly to Roger as the instructor led Neville away. "If you hadn't saved him, he'd be badly hurt, maybe worse." "All right, Daphne," Roger replied with a small smile. It didn't seem like a moment for scoring favors. As if fate were teasing them, Malfoy was once again the one with Neville's remembrall, tossing it in his hand and grinning. "What an idiot," he said, amused, letting the glass ball catch the sunlight and scatter colors across his face. He laughed and added, with a casual cutting tone, "Roger, I agree with you." Chapter 50. Schrödinger School Rules. The Longbottoms have astonishing courage. A flying pig. Ha! A stupid pig that almost fell to its death. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Will his grandmother smack him? Malfoy laughed, riding his broomstick and guffawing. Ha! A flying pig. The others burst into laughter at Neville's nickname. "Malfoy, give me the ball." Harry stepped forward and called, anger sharpening his voice. "What, going to be a hero? Or show off Gryffindor's so-called courage?" Malfoy shot back, glancing at Rogue and seeing that he stayed silent. He aimed his taunts at Harry instead. "If Neville's so brave, let him go fetch it on the roof himself. Harry, what do you say to putting it up on the astronomy tower?" He threaded his broom through the air, circling above the students, then climbed higher. "If you want it, come and get it." Rogue didn't fly. Malfoy took that as proof he wasn't worth provoking. Harry's temper flared. He gripped his broomstick hard, ready to take off, but Hermione grabbed his arm. "Harry, absolutely not," she hissed. "Don't forget Madame Hooch's warning. You could be expelled." "Get out of the way," Harry snapped and launched himself after Malfoy. Hermione called after him, terrified, but he was already airborne. "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. At worst, they'll get told off," Rogue said, unconcerned about any punishment. "Humph, they'll lose house points," Hermione pouted, looking as if she might cry. Ron, beside her, started cheering loudly, "Go, Harry! Go, Harry!" and others followed his lead. Hermione wrinkled her nose, feeling increasingly out of place with everyone else. For a moment she wondered if she'd been better off in Ravenclaw. "Rogue, aren't you going to try?" Daphne said, watching the two chase each other high above and picturing him swooping up to break it up. "Spare me," Rogue said. "For me, just getting through this class is a miracle." The flying students blurred through the sky like whirling dark shapes. Rogue fought the urge to raise his wand. It was hard enough for him to manage flying class at all. Malfoy hadn't expected Harry, new to flying, to be so relentless. He felt pressure, even a little fear. "Malfoy, give me back the remembrall, or I'll knock you off," Harry shouted, determination flashing in his eyes. The freedom of flight sent something hot coursing through him. He felt alive in a way he'd never known. "You wouldn't dare!" Malfoy barked, trying to hide his nerves. He knew that another couple of collisions like this, and he'd be overpowered. Harry's speed increased. He was close enough to reach out. In a panic, Malfoy tossed the remembrall toward the tower. It flew fast, headed straight for the high wall, and if it hit, it would shatter. Harry leveled out, pushed down on his broomstick, and plunged like a diving hawk. The wind screamed in his ears, the crowd's shouts barely registering. The timid students below hid their faces, expecting a terrible crash. Just before the remembrall struck the stone, Harry executed an impossibly sharp turn and came to a dead stop, catching it cleanly in his hand. Cheers erupted. Harry descended like a conquering hero, holding his prize. Dumbledore watched him with a pleased smile. "Congratulations, Professor McGonagall. Gryffindor has found an extraordinary seeker," he said. He seemed delighted that Harry had discovered a subject at which he excelled. For true talent, we should bend the rules so it can flourish, McGonagall said to Dumbledore. For example, let him join the Quidditch team. Good idea, Dumbledore agreed, eyes twinkling. In the excitement, the usual rules about Quidditch eligibility were casually brushed aside. Malfoy, green with jealousy, heard his housemates vatting. Scorn, Daphne snorted. You lost to a beginner. What? Malfoy protested, but he could do nothing faced with the facts. He couldn't admit that Harry might be better than he was. McGonagall called Harry over, still in her favorite green robes, and the boy followed obediently, head bowed, unaware of the pleased lift at the corners of her mouth. Draco, if that were the case, what punishment would you get? Rogue reminded him. No way. Professor Snape wouldn't expel me. Besides, my father's a governor. Malfoy snapped, trying to cover his unease. Harry Potter is the famous boy who lived, Rogue said. Do you think he'd be expelled and you wouldn't? Did you save the magical world too? It was an inescapable truth. Malfoy had always wanted to befriend Harry because of who he was. Being rebuffed had made him spiteful. It's not as simple as you think, Rogue said, approaching Malfoy. You should treat Harry as an equal. If he'd grown up in the wizarding world, that reputation would make him an uncrowned prince. McGonagall led Harry to the doorway of the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom and called over Oliver Wood. It dawned on Harry then that he wasn't about to be punished. Oliver Wood, McGonagall introduced, captain of our house Quidditch team. Wood, I've found you a seeker, she said, eyes bright. Wood looked Harry up and down, hardly able to believe McGonagall's certainty. Really? He asked. Of course, she replied, and told him exactly what had happened. He's an undeniable genius. The first time he rode a broom, he could. Wood, trust me, Harry will become the best seeker in the whole school, McGonagall added with conviction. Wood circled Harry as he mounted the broom. Light, agile, we have to get you a proper broom, he said, impressed. Harry, could you just hover for a moment? No need to fly. Harry did, and Wood watched him carefully. Yes, he's perfect for seeker. He nodded again, reevaluating the boy with professional eyes. Harry, I must say, your build is ideal for the position. Dean, according to the school rules, Wood began, but McGonagall cut him off with a smile. Don't worry, I've already spoken to the headmaster. We need a better team than last year. That crushing defeat to Slytherin left me dreading Professor Snape for weeks, Wood said, remembering. Dean, I understand, Wood replied. How about a Nimbus 2000 for Harry? A Comet 260 would do as well. Chapter 51, Dark Magic Talent. I'll consider it, Professor McGonagall said noncommittally, staring at Harry, whose eyes were shining with excitement. She reminded him, I expect to hear about your diligent training in Quidditch. Otherwise, Potter, I will reconsider you joining the team. Harry's cheeks flushed. The idea that the head of house would let him join the Quidditch team left him speechless. He kept nodding vigorously, his expression set with determination, shouting in his head, Defeat Slytherin. At dinner, he could hardly wait to tell Ron the news and made him promise to keep it a secret. Seeker? Ron's eyes widened. He stared at Harry, unable to believe it. Harry, well done. Fred and George Weasley came over grinning a moment later. Wood told us everything, they whispered. With you as our secret weapon, we'll make Slytherin run for their lives. Harry's daring display in flying class spread through Hogwarts fast. Everyone was talking about it, and Malfoy found himself the center of more hushed, pointed conversations than usual. Around the Slytherin table, people discussed what Harry's inclusion would mean. With Potter joining Gryffindor next year, there'll be a serious threat, Marcus said, worrying over a beef pasty. Rogge, some players graduate next year. There'll be open spots. Want to try out? Rogge, who'd been about to leave, blinked in surprise. Me? He thought Marcus was joking. No, I have no interest in Quidditch. I'd rather. He shrugged and added with a smirk, use a few unforgivable curses on it. He pointed instead at Malfoy, who looked sullen. Let Draco have a try. He's more suited to it than I am. Malfoy was taken aback by the sudden recommendation. He hadn't expected it after their argument that morning. He straightened, ready to accept any assessment Marcus might make. Marcus hesitated, but this afternoon showed Potter's better. His doubt made Malfoy angrier. If Draco joins the team, the House of Malfoy can at least sponsor some Nimbus 2000s, Rogge added, eager for a Slytherin win. Marcus still hadn't decided. His indecision made Malfoy bristle. "Goyle, Crabbe, come with me," Malfoy snapped, rising to go and vent on Harry. Down in the dungeons, Professor Snape was examining the memory potion Rogge had submitted. "Professor, if I drink a Felix Felicis before brewing a potion, will my success rate be higher?" Rogge asked, hopeful. Snape turned his head coldly, eyes dark and unreadable. "Put away your cleverness. Felix Felicis can only help you succeed. It won't tell you how to succeed." His voice carried a sharp edge. "I told you in the first lesson, potion making is a precise science and a rigorous craft. Felix Felicis will only ruin a potion maker. If you can't understand so simple a truth, then I have indeed overestimated you." Rogge lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Snape did not let him off easily. "Go and process that pile of staghorn fern into 1-inch pieces." The hard, spiky staghorn fern in the corner was one of the memory potion's ingredients. If it was cut with a knife, it could be ruined. Rogge reached for a knife. Snape barked, "Are you a muggle? Use your wand." Rogge waved his wand, sheepish under Snape's glare. "Did you always use a knife to process ingredients?" Snape demanded, suspicious. When Rogge had to nod, Snape's face went paler with anger. "From now on, submit 10 bottles every time." "10 bottles?" Rogge protested. "Is that too little? Then 20. Snape put the memory potion Rogge had submitted into a cabinet and pulled out an old book. "Learn this spell, then process them all." Rogge saw the book was an herbology text, likely Snape's from his student days. He couldn't help admiring aloud, "Amazing to develop Sectum Sempra from a cutting charm. Who developed this spell?" "It's incredible. A genius." "What nonsense are you spouting?" "Hurry up and process the fern," Snape snapped, tugging his cloak. "If you don't finish them today, stay here. Don't go back." He left without another word, his footsteps quick and efficient. Rogge smiled faintly and sat down to study Sectum Sempra carefully. As an advanced form of a cutting charm, Sectum Sempra retained the core of the original, but it had been refined. It worked quietly with no obvious wand sparks, produced precise, rapid cuts, and ripped tissues cleanly, all attributes prized by a potion maker. A single flick could make a precise, smooth incision. Most importantly, it could tear apart a material's tissues in a way that boosted a potion's potency. Rogge chanted the incantation and felt a distinct current of magic surge through him. The magic carried a cold, eerie tone, as if all warmth and life had been drained away. Inside his mind, it churned like an ominous vortex, a low pressure before a storm. That subtle oppression stirred something dark inside him. A wash of negative emotions seemed to boil up with the magic's fluctuation. When the spell left his wand tip, Rogge felt a sharp, dark arrow fly toward the staghorn fern. The cold, desperate aura made life seem fragile and fleeting. The fern split silently into two, as if it had been waiting to be cut. As expected of the half-blood prince, Rogge murmured with a wry smile. His dark arts were profound. He wondered to himself, "Does my dark affinity mean I'm drawn to the dark arts?" He instinctively waved his wand again, and more fern fell neatly processed. A small internal display of knowledge and capability seemed to flash in his mind. Rogge Travis Magic 1315, Mental Strength 16, Talents, Dark Affinity, Strong Will, Night Vision. Skills, Wandless Casting, Dark Arts, Silent Casting, Advanced Potion Mastery. Potions, Blue Moonlight, Memory Potion, Dittany Potion. Spells, Sectum Sempra, Elva 1, Defend Over 3. "I've already mastered Silent Casting," Rogge whispered, surprised. He realized he could now cast without spoken words and, in some cases, without a wand. A natural dark arts specialist, he thought, and a dangerous idea crossed his mind. If I learn Avada Kedavra, could I secretly get rid of Lord Voldemort? He continued processing the staghorn fern, considering the difference. Compared to textbook charms, Sectum Sempra's power was on another level, devastatingly effective. That cold, dangerous power was intoxicating. Any wizard would feel its pull. Should I secretly go to the restricted section and take a look? The thought popped into his head like an itch. He had the simulation function. One trip, just once, couldn't hurt, could it? No. Why would I suddenly want to go to the restricted section? Rogge startled at his own thought. How could his mind have been influenced like that? Chapter 52, Squib Office. Magic? Rogge peered at Snape's textbook, not entirely convinced. Hold off. Wait until Christmas and go to Moscow to see. Patience is a rare virtue. He thought of Professor McGonagall's admonitions, and dutifully remained in the dungeon, continuing to process medicinal herbs. Night deepened slowly, and the moon rose high over the towers. Rogge stretched, sore from long hours, and muttered, "Snape's exploiting child labor, and not even paying!" The once messy bundles of staghorn moss had been trimmed into neat 1-inch segments, tied and stacked so they looked almost pleasing. Rogge glanced around the office. The walls were hung with biological specimens that made his skin crawl. Glass jars of all sizes contained rehydrated beast limbs, the brains of unknown creatures, and rolling eyeballs. He shook his head. The professor had a proper office but insisted on living in the dungeon. No wonder he was called an old bat. Rogge slipped the herb book under his arm and left the classroom. Because the dungeon sat so far underground, getting back to the common room meant a long detour. He checked his pocket watch. Almost midnight. Great. He had to watch out for Filch and Madame Norris. Rogge crept through the castle with an uneasy heart, looking over his shoulder for the caretaker. He hadn't learned the disillusionment charm on the first day of school. Foolish of him, but the charm was permitted at Hogwarts, and Filch, being a squib, wouldn't notice it anyway. By day, Hogwarts was lively. By night, it truly came alive. Instruments drifted down the corridors to play themselves, paintings visited and talked, and a passing portrait even nodded a greeting to the rule-breaker slipping past curfew. The suits of armor along the corridor clattered from their stands. They brawled in the daytime, but at night they were worse. One, a Gothic-style German plate with smooth, ornate surfaces and razor edges, hefted a two-handed longsword and chopped savagely. The opponent, a hulking English suit, raised its warhammer to block, then countered with a crushing blow. Knights were long gone, but the spirit of battle burned on in the steel. Rogge watched as the German armor methodically dismantled its rival. "Precise German craftsmanship, even in the magical world," he said, clapping. The victor bowed humbly to the student, and then the defeated pieces crashed to the floor with a noise that echoed from the corridor into the great hall. Rogge started and fled. "Peeves is going to tattle," he panicked when a shrill voice echoed from somewhere above. Peeves materialized, floating and laughing maniacally around him. "Little wizard, out past curfew. Not sleeping, are we?" "Move aside, Peeves." "No, not unless you say please." Peeves pulled a face. Footsteps pattered above. Filch was getting closer. Rogge wanted to tie the poltergeist up with a binding charm and hand him to the Bloody Baron, but he kept his cool. "Please," he said, then wished he hadn't. Peeves descended, eyes glittering. "How did you know the answer I wanted?" Peeves asked, curious. "Can you move?" Peeves looked annoyed but slid aside. The instant Rogge stepped past, Peeves screamed at the top of his lungs. "Filch! Filch! There's a student out past curfew." "Damn Peeves. I'll give you to the Baron yet," Rogge muttered. "Filch, don't let him trick you." Peeves taunted. Filch's heavy footsteps grew louder, and the caretaker and his cat arrived. Peeves had been upstairs a moment before, and stubbornly refused to tell Filch where the student had gone. "Stupid Filch, you can't solve Peeves' riddles. Even if I told you there was a student breaking rules, you couldn't catch him." Peeves vanished into the wall, his mocking laughter lingering in the corridor. Madame Norris clambered along the pictures, ears pricking, and let out a sharp meow toward a corner. "Let's see where you run, little wizard," Filch snarled, lantern bobbing as he gave chase. The corridor ended at the entrance to the Slytherin common room. Filch probably had an idea where a rule-breaker might hide. Rogge raced for the statue that concealed the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets and rattled off the password, but the stone slab did not move. "Oh no, it's Friday," he said wryly. The password must have changed. He rattled through old phrases. Purity and power, pure blood supremacy, heart of the Black Lake, and even made up a few, but nothing worked. He didn't want to be trapped in a dead end. Slip away first, he thought, but Madame Norris had already tracked him down. She meowed loudly, summoning Filch. The caretaker pounded around the corner and caught Rogge red-handed. "Ha ha! I knew it was you!" Filch crowed, voice like a wet gutter. Dread ran through the students of the school for a reason. "Good evening, caretaker, Madame Norris." Rogge forced a smile and tried to talk his way out. "I was late because of Professor Snape. Do you believe me?" Filch grunted and grabbed Rogge by the shoulder. "You'll tell Professor Snape yourself," he said, hauling the boy toward his office. I'm going to put you in detention." Filch gloated as he shoved Rogge inside. The walls were lined with shining iron chains, everything kept meticulously. "The head would do well to let me reinstate medieval punishments," he raved, tugging in mock menace at a whip hanging nearby. "Troublesome students ought to be hung upside down and soundly whipped until they learn." "Mr. Filch, that's unnecessary, isn't it?" Rogge said with a crooked smile. The caretaker hadn't caught anyone in ages. He pranced about like an overexcited terrier. "Stay put," Filch ordered. "Don't try to run. The other miscreant hasn't been caught yet." He left Madame Norris to watch Rogge, slammed the door, and it locked with a clang. The room smelled faintly of fish and damp. Rogge realized why Madame Norris was so thin under Filch's care. The advantage of having an owl showed itself again. Rogge always carried a handful of cat food. Madame Norris leapt onto the table and flattened her ears, hissing a warning. Rogge scattered a few kibbles. The cat froze then, after a cautious sniff, started to eat greedily. Within moments, she was ravenous, scarfing up everything on the table and rubbing her head against Rogge's leg, asking for more. Rogge laughed softly. "There's no cat food that won't win over a cat," he said, stroking her. He looked entirely at ease, hardly the picture of someone who'd just been caught breaking curfew. Filch's office was dim, windowless, and cluttered. A single oil lamp swung from the low ceiling, casting more shadows than light. The air was murky and damp, giving the place an Azkaban-like chill that made Rogge frown. He flicked his wand. "Scourgify," he murmured, and the desk and nearby surfaces brightened. He tried to open a window in the thick stone wall, but the castle's protective enchantments bounced his spell back. Rogge carried Madame Norris past rows of wooden cabinets labeled with confiscated contraband. One drawer was marked in block letters. High-risk items. Chapter 53, Impossible Requirements. High risk? Interesting. Rogge opened the drawer and found a jumble of oddities. Biting teacups, spoons with little legs, dung bombs, Gubrythian fire, and a heavy ring of unknown keys. Some pieces were clearly prank items, but most were genuine magical objects, even a few wands. Filch was a squib, so where did the wands come from? Rogge picked one up on impulse, waved it twice, then tossed it back into the drawer. He opened the next one and was greeted by a crush of chocolate frog cards. Like a mouse in a store of cheese, he dove into the caretaker's long-hoarded collection, eyes bright. There were trinkets that reeked of age, probably left by caretakers gone before. The cards alone filled several drawers. One could almost complete a set just by rummaging here. If the younger students ever learned about Filch's stash, the place would be swarmed. "Thanks, Filch. Mrs. Norris, you don't mind if I take a few of these, do you?" Seeing the cat make no objection, Rogge slipped several cards into the roomy pockets of his robe. Mrs. Norris lay sprawled and content on the table, her round belly making her look permanently sleepy. In a faded drawer, he found a small crystal box. Inside lay a golden snitch, the kind used in Quidditch matches, delicate, finely made, clearly a collector's piece. The front of the box bore a gilded inscription, Bowman Right, No. 101, a commemorative edition then. Rogge handled the box carefully, half afraid the tiny snitch would flutter away. The metal wasn't humming with active magic. It sat quiet and cold. The snitch was no larger than a walnut, wings tucked into small indentations on its sides. Intricate patterns crawled across its surface, like some message locked beneath the metal. When a stray current of magic brushed it, the globe inside trembled and tried to spin. Rogge held it tight until the motion died down. "A clever piece of alchemy," he murmured. "The mechanism must be intricate." He would have loved to take it apart, examine every gear, but it felt wrong to destroy a collectible. He tucked the box back into the drawer, glanced at his pocket watch, past 1 in the morning, and with Filch still absent, blew out the oil lamp and dozed in the chair. Bang! 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 Morning came with a hard slam on the table that shot Rogge awake. Snape stood in the doorway without a word, a dark silhouette in the corridor, and Filch was there too, looking more rattled than usual. "Professor, can you sign me out?" Rogge blurted. "A pass?" Snape's expression didn't change, but Rogge felt the hallway pressure as students hurried to class around them. Snape's lean bulk blocked the way. Everyone squeezed past him with careful, shrinking movements. Snape sneered. "Stayed until dawn dealing with a few things? Hagrid's dog moves faster than that, you know." He glared at Rogge. You were caught right at the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, didn't know the password, and just stood there? Wasn't I doing a night patrol like everyone else? Rogge protested, but Snape's cold eyes swept over Harry and his group hurrying toward Charms. 5 points from Slytherin for breaking curfew, and detention. Snape's point deduction wasn't what stung most. It was the humiliation. Rogge tried to put on a grin anyway. Harry and Ron, having heard Slytherin lose points, perked up. A little added rivalry brightened their morning. They trotted off toward Charms, whispering. "Head of house, don't worry, I'll get those points back," Rogge promised when Snape's back was turned. He said it lightheartedly. Points were trivial, and he figured earning them back would be a matter of minutes. Snape's voice cut through. 3 days detention and 50 points to make up. Fail to get them back, and you'll be harvesting merfolk kelp at the bottom of the Black Lake. Head, tomorrow's Saturday. Someone behind him called out. Snape paused, as if the reminder had landed oddly, then turned and stalked away without another glance. Daphne edged forward once he was gone, concern written on her face. "Rogge, are you all right?" Hermione hovered beside her, worry creasing her brow. "It's only a swim," Rogge said with a lazy shrug. "If it weren't for Friday, 50 points would be a piece of cake." He forced a smile. Snape's bark was worse than his bite, he thought. Harsh words, softer heart. In Charms, Rogge's mood brightened. He was alert, answering questions and surprising Professor Flitwick, who watched him with a bemused, almost bewildered expression. "Has this young man taken the wrong tonic today?" the professor muttered in public, and then, a little more kindly, called on him for an example. "We will be practicing Wingardium Leviosa," Flitwick announced, perching on a tower of books to demonstrate. "One of the first levitation charms every witch and wizard learns. Remember the movement we practiced, swish and flick." "Swish and flick," the class responded in unison. Rogge normally would have gone through the motions, a lazy flick and a shrug. Today he followed the sweep precisely, every gesture measured and neat. Daphne watched with amusement when he signaled her not to distract him. "Excellent," Flitwick said, looking around. Most of the class had the movement down. Rogge's was textbook perfect. Pronounce the incantation correctly, Wingardium Leviosa. If you don't want your sternum crushed by an angry ox, don't pronounce the F as a T. When they began to try the spell, feathers rose and bobbed across the room. Hermione, for once, not only didn't immediately show off, she didn't perform at all. She sat very still, looking as though she was waiting for something. "Wingardium Leviosa," Rogge intoned, then concentrated without lifting his wand. The feather before him rose, hovered, and drifted obediently through the air. "Remarkable," Flitwick's voice crackled with astonishment. "Rogge, are you wandless?" "Of course," Rogge said calmly. Murmurs rippled through the students. Wandless magic was whispered about as if it were a dangerous secret. "Isn't that only for advanced students?" someone asked. Harry peered over the desk to see. "Rogge, what is wandless magic?" Ron asked, both curious and a little suspicious. Hermione answered before Rogge could. "Wandless magic is the casting of spells without a wand as a focus. It's an advanced technique, complex and difficult to control. Very few witches and wizards can manage it." "Even so," someone added, "if you ignore precise control, in some places even common folk can manage tricks without wands." "Bragging," Ron scoffed, scowling at Rogge. He didn't believe Rogge could pull off wandless magic. The class buzzed with excitement and skepticism in equal measure, eyes glued to the boy who'd just made a feather float with nothing but his concentration. Chapter 54. Whose troll is hanging out? "Rogue, wandless magic requires great talent and a lot of practice," Professor Flitwick reminded him. "Professor, I can do it," Rogue said firmly. Flitwick nodded and stepped back. Rogue set his wand on the desk and, under every eye in the classroom, quietly intoned Wingardium Leviosa. The charm was flawless. The feather on the table rose and hovered with perfect steadiness. Rogue guided it in a slow circle above the desks before bringing it gently back to rest. Gasps rippled through the room. Wandless magic was rare and difficult. If casting with a wand was a 1 on the scale of difficulty, wandless was at least a 10. Making a nearly weightless feather obey so precisely demonstrated just how skilled he was. Flitwick was visibly impressed. "Excellent, truly excellent," he exclaimed and was the first to clap. Ron gave a reluctant 2 claps. Slytherin, 5 points for outstanding performance. Yeah! The little snakes cheered. As long as Rogue agreed to demonstrate, he could earn the house an easy 5, flying class being the notable exception. Rogue gave Flitwick a small bow of thanks. 5 points wouldn't satisfy whatever score Snape had demanded, but it would at least ease Snape's expression a little. Hermione followed immediately behind, producing a perfect Wingardium Leviosa herself. Flitwick lavished her with praise as well. Hermione, did you already know that? Ron asked suspiciously, his gaze on her. Humph, mind your own business, she snapped, annoyed at Weasley's insufferable competitiveness, and returned to practicing her spell. Thanks for batting for me, Rogue said to Hermione after class. Your wandless magic convinced Professor Flitwick to give those points. You're welcome, she smiled. But honestly, it was your show that did it. He grinned. Still, I don't think I'll get the 50 points Snape wants. I need to figure out how to breathe underwater. He remembered what Harry had used in the Goblet of Fire, but needed the exact name. You found so many books? Hermione's eyes widened at the stack Rogue was carrying. It nearly hid his face. No choice. Who told me I couldn't turn into a fish? Rogue set the pile down with a heavy thud. Madame Pince shot him a murderous look, and he muttered a quick apology. Be careful. Hermione helped him sort the books into 2 piles and whispered, Madame Pince treasures these books so much that she thinks we're damaging them just by turning the pages. Luckily, they belong to the library, or she'd chase us out. I borrowed a history of ancient magic once, and she lectured me for weeks, Hermione added, producing a loan slip with a long warning printed across it. If you tear, rip, or deface this book, I will, within my power, make you suffer the most dreadful consequences. Rogue pulled out a book. The top one was titled Forgotten Ancient Magic and Spells, with a small line beneath it. There is no problem this book cannot solve. In the past, I always find answers in the library, Hermione said, hopeful. We'll find it too. They plowed through title after title, peculiar magical plants, potions and ingredients, the scope of spells, simple to complex, Dictionary of Spells 1732 to 1960. Minute by minute, shelves emptied around them, but nothing. Rogue rubbed his tired eyes. Halloween, and the library would be closing early. Madame Pince alone remained, watching them with the hard little smile of a woman determined to keep her books pristine. Let's return these first, Rogue said. He couldn't stand being under her glare any longer. Rogue, maybe we're looking in the wrong place? Hermione said, sliding the last book back onto the shelf. Professor Snape, eccentric as he is, wouldn't set us an impossible task. He's the potions master. It has to be some herb or potion ingredient. You're right. I'll keep checking the potions and magical plants sections. Children, it is time to leave for the Great Hall for Halloween, Madame Pince announced suddenly. The candlelight stretched her thin figure into a long, severe silhouette that made both of them jump. Madam, there are still 5 minutes until closing, Rogue protested, fishing for his pocket watch, but Hermione pulled him along. Do you see the feather duster in her hand? Hermione hissed. Last year, a first-year dropped a book, and she chased him out with that thing. She does remind me of someone, Rogue said. Everything about her is strict and unforgiving. Her diligence is not kindness, it's meticulousness turned sour, Hermione agreed. The two shared a private smile. They both knew exactly what the other meant. Rogue's face lit up with mischief. I've thought of a fun prank. What kind of prank? Hermione leaned in. Impersonate Madame Pince and write a letter to Snape, Rogue whispered with a grin. Hermione's eyes went wide. If they find out, she began. Snape was the teacher everyone feared. Rogue only shrugged. Don't worry, I'll tell you a secret. He lowered his voice and leaned toward her ear. Our dean is single because he once loved a classmate very much. It's a pity their child is already at the school, a first year this year, just like us. Hermione stared. She had always assumed Snape was a research-obsessed, loveless figure. Really? Rogue sighed dramatically. A simp will not die well. Is that a Chinese proverb? Hermione blinked at him. Don't worry about the details. Who told him to punish me down to the bottom of the lake? Rogue trailed off as a sudden smell hit them, the reek of stale socks and something like dead rats. His hand shot out and pulled Hermione closer. Thud, as if an elephant had stamped down the corridor. A colossal shape blocked the end of the passage, its shadow a spreading black wall under the candlelight. "It's a troll!" Rogge hissed. He yanked Hermione toward the nearest statue and pressed them both flat behind it. The creature was enormous, at least 12 feet tall, lumbering toward them with a thick wooden club that scraped the stone floor with a grating, horrible sound. Its skin was gray and stony, its head disproportionately small like a bean on a huge body. If they tried to run now, they'd be seen for sure. Hermione clutched Rogue's arm so hard her knuckles whitened. Her legs were suddenly weak. If Rogge hadn't clamped a hand over her mouth, she would have screamed. "Shh, quiet," Rogge murmured, trying to calm Hermione. She clung to him, eyes wide with panic. "Rogge, how can there be a troll in the school? It's coming. What do we do?" Her voice shook. "Follow me." Rogge steered her around the corner, feeling for the wall. They were too close for a sprint. There was no time to run for the library's simulation button. Instead of banking on an escape, it was smarter to save what magic they had and face the thing. "Take out your wand, Hermie. We're wizards. We can handle this." Hermione nodded, trembling but gripping her wand. She kept glancing at the troll as it lumbered nearer. It stopped. "Should we go find the headmaster?" she whispered when it halted and began laughing at a nearby painting. "Tonight's Halloween. Everyone's in the Great Hall except us and Madame Pince," Rogge said. He watched the troll, fascinated and wary, as it jabbered at the painting. "I'll distract it. You find Madame Pince and get her to take you to the headmaster and the professors." Thinking of Dumbledore made Rogge frown. If Quirrell had anything to do with this, he wouldn't have been able to get a troll in without the headmaster's tacit approval. Quirrell's real aim, Rogge suspected, wasn't Harry at all, but the Philosopher's Stone. Harry was only a convenient distraction. Letting a troll into the castle tonight, when Dumbledore and all the staff were in the Great Hall for the feast, would be reckless unless someone wanted it to happen. Rogge was beginning to suspect the troll had been allowed in on purpose, and that he had simply stumbled across it. Down in the Great Hall, giant pumpkins floated, grotesquely carved, and the long rows of candles hovered between the tables. The ghosts were livelier than usual. Even the Bloody Baron looked unusually pleased. Harry noticed Hermione's absence and asked, "Where's Hermione?" "She's with Rogge from Slytherin in the library. I saw them earlier," Ron muttered. "She's practically a Gryffindor traitor. She could have won House Cup on her own." "We heard this morning. Rogge lost 5 points for breaking school rules. If Hermione hadn't covered for him, Snape would have docked more," Ron went on. "If you ask me, she might as well transfer to Slytherin." Another student griped. Before anyone could say more, Professor Quirrell burst into the hall, voice trembling. "There's a troll in the school." He looked straight at Dumbledore, eyes pleading. "I think you know, Headmaster." An unseen force slammed into Quirrell before he could finish. He crumpled unconscious and screams ripped through the hall. Dumbledore took command immediately, instructing professors and prefects to calm and evacuate the students. While Dumbledore worked, Rogge had to act. "Hermione, listen to me. When I say run, you run. Don't look back." Rogge's voice was steady now. I can't run fast," Hermione choked. "Don't cry. Wizards don't cry." Rogge brushed away a tear and managed a sunny grin. "I'll distract it. Keep your wand ready. If I die and turn into a ghost, I'll haunt you every day. So if you don't want me lurking while you shower, go find the headmaster and the professors and bring help." "You wouldn't dare," Hermione said, despite herself, and a shaky laugh escaped her. Rogge sprang into the corridor and shouted, waving his wand, "Hey, big guy, over here!" He used Wingardium Leviosa to heave a statue at the troll. The creature, its greasy feet thudding, turned toward the small, energetic figure dancing just out of reach. It roared and charged, club swinging, sending statues and suits of armor flying. "Hermione!" Rogge called. "Close your eyes!" He clicked his wand to Lumos, the first and most reliable spell he'd learned, and the tip flared like a blinding bulb, bathing the corridor in harsh white light. The troll's milky eyes fixed on the bright dot Rogge made it see. Enraged by the noise and movement, it lunged. "Impedimenta!" Rogge shouted, trying to slow it, but the spell slashed harmlessly off the troll's magically resistant hide. It didn't even stagger. It charged like an angry unicorn. Rogge rolled aside at the last second, barely avoiding the club's sweeping strikes. The The troll's blows grew wilder and more dangerous, forcing Rogge to dodge again and again. If he hadn't kept the creature blinded, he would have been crushed. Wingardium Leviosa. Rogge seized a chance and took hold of the troll's club, trying to wrest it away. The club quivered in midair, but the troll held on, its massive hands crushing the wood. Rogge rolled away and sent a nearby iron warhammer whipping through the air. It slammed into the troll's head with a metallic clang. The blow only dazed it for a heartbeat. "Headmaster, I'm not finished with you," Rogge muttered under his breath. The hammer had barely made a dent. "Hermione, run!" Hermione stumbled out from behind a statue and reflexively pointed her wand. A young witch's magic might frighten a pygmy puff, but against a creature this size, it would not be decisive. Rogge barked, "Go!" and Hermione reluctantly dropped her wand, tears sparkling on her cheeks as she fled. The troll rubbed its head, staring at the small things scurrying away. Rogge kept hurling objects with Wingardium Leviosa. At first, the troll swatted them away. Once its sight cleared, it began to ignore them and strike with grim force. The wind from its club stung Rogge's face. Thanks to the augmentation from the dragon's blood, he'd bathed in the tranquil Star River. His muscles were stronger than they looked. Otherwise, the blows would already have smashed him. But the corridor was a trap. It ended in a mosaic window, no escape that way. If the troll decided to charge straight, Rogge would be crushed against the glass. The creature's brain was not sharp, and for the moment it didn't charge, but its swings were steadily closing the margin Rogge had to work with. "I can't drag this out," Rogge thought, checking his dwindling reserves of magic. He counted options: trap the troll, or attack it until something gave. There weren't many chances left. Outside the window, a cliff fell away. Jumping wasn't an option, so there were really only two choices. "Marsh manifestation," Rogge cried. Chapter 56. Halloween Tonight. His wand was trained at the floor beneath the troll's feet, but like Filch's office, this corridor's flooring had been specially warded. The spell skipped across the surface and rebounded harmlessly away. The troll laughed, unimpressed, and swung its club in a savage arc. Rogge rolled out of the way. The club whistled over his head and smashed into the wall. He found himself pressed 3 inches from the stone, feeling as if death itself were standing behind him with a raised scythe. The troll howled, thrilled that its prey seemed trapped. The corridor filled with the foul, suffocating stench of rotten socks and eggs. Rogge wrinkled his nose and fought the urge to choke. It hefted the great wooden club with both hands and brought it down toward his skull. Cornered, Rogge's panic settled into a cold, focused calm. He gripped his wand and concentrated until every nerve in his body felt like a drawn wire. The wand's core, Kieran's heartstring, responded, shedding a faint crimson glow through the twisted sandalwood. Magic flowed back into him like a warm current. A tiny readout on his panel surged, 3.5 to 15. He drew himself up and fixed the troll with a steady gaze. "Cotton clouds soften," he cried, adding the force of his will to the charm. A brilliant crimson beam lanced from his wand, not at the troll, but at the club streaking toward him. In the troll's delighted confusion, the club turned, in mid-swing, into a soft, puffy mass of cotton. The fabric exploded apart before it could land, sending lint flying like a sudden blizzard. Stripped of its weapon, the creature lost its balance, the bulk of its weight pitched forward. There was a sick, clean crack as its ankle snapped. Before pain could register, the troll collapsed with the bruising force of a small earthquake. The corridor shook, white lint drifted down in gentle, dizzying spirals. Rogge didn't waste the moment. "Sectum sempra," he hissed. The dark spell struck the troll's skull, entered its eye socket, and exited the back of its head. The small gray matter that passed for its brain spilled out, hot and bloody. Rogge stepped over the fallen body, crimson smearing the cotton-like tufts as he left the ruined stretch of corridor and leaned against a shattered statue, utterly exhausted. Footsteps ran down the stairwell. Headmaster Dumbledore and several professors arrived on the scene. Rogge managed a weary half-bow. "The police always arrive last," he said wryly. "Happy Halloween, Headmaster." He was filthy, stinking of troll and blood, but still maintained an oddly elegant air. "Hermione!" she cried, hurrying forward and colliding into him. Tears came, then stifled sobs. Rogge offered a crooked smile. "Hermione, you're about as strong as a troll today," he teased, but it only made her cry harder. Dumbledore looked at the troll, now caked in lint, its skull leaking blood in a steady bubble from the hole. "Rogue, what happened?" he asked, stunned. He could not have imagined a first year had killed a troll. "As you see, Headmaster?" Rogue shrugged and helped Hermione to her feet first. "We were in the library this afternoon researching. On our way back, we ran into this oaf. And then, this is a troll. Why didn't you fetch a teacher?" Professor McGonagall kept patting at her chest. The ruined corridor and the corpse unnerved her. If a student had been hurt because of a delay, the thought made her shudder. The troll was blocking the entrance to the Great Hall. "We couldn't avoid it," Hermione blurted out. "Rogue led it away so I could get help, but by the time I found a teacher, it was—" Her voice broke again. Rogue moved to lighten the mood. "Quite dim, really. Like a circus ape," he said, but Hermione only sobbed harder. He glanced up at Dumbledore and continued, "I tried a transfiguration charm to turn the floor into a marsh and trap it, but the wards on the floor, like Filch's office, bounced the spell right back." "A transfiguration charm?" Dumbledore murmured approvingly. "Clever. And then I turned its club into cotton," Rogue demonstrated with a mock flourish. "It swung as if nothing had happened, then the club disintegrated mid-air." "I didn't want to kill it," Rogue added, the tone softening. "But there was a wall behind me, and—" He glanced at Snape with a wordless plea for understanding. "If I hadn't just learned Sectum Sempra—" Snape, who had been inspecting the troll, nodded once toward Dumbledore. "It was the spell I taught him," he said flatly. Dumbledore looked thoughtful, then said gently, "Ending a life is never easy. Given the circumstances, I understand why you did what you did. But remember, we do not use darkness to fight darkness. We use it only to protect the light." He found no inconsistency in Rogue's account, though he couldn't shake a small unease. "Strategy, yes. Slytherin gains 5 points." Dumbledore smiled. "Hermione, your loyalty earns Gryffindor 5 points. Children, on this Halloween night, may magic be with you." With a small, practiced flick of his wand, Dumbledore restored the corridor. The wreckage smoothed away. The cotton lint that had tangled the troll's hair and skin lost whatever enchantment held it and fizzed into prickly wood shavings. "Dean, this troll is my trophy, right?" Rogue turned to Snape expectantly. Snape only inclined his head. "Excellent," Rogue said, forgetting the fear and the stench. He began to enumerate possibilities with the clinical enthusiasm of someone thinking like a researcher. Troll snot for potions, eyeballs for specimens, skin with anti-magic properties could be very useful for study. "Enough," McGonagall snapped. "Both of you, back to your common rooms." She shot a look at Rogue laden with reproach. Rogue remembered suddenly how foul he smelled. He gagged and fought the urge to vomit. Without Harry and Ron's involvement, the Golden Trio had not been present. The responsibility of keeping them out of trouble had kept Hermione out of Slytherin Tower on curfew nights. Rogue, still adjusting his robes, murmured under his breath, "If only Hermione were in Slytherin." He closed his book. Snape didn't let Rogue off easy. He'd sent a message that Rogue report to the dungeons on Sunday, no doubt to collect herbs near the Black Lake. "Dean, I wish you a colorful life," Rogue said with a sly smile, and as a small act of revenge, left a note for Madame Pince written in Snape's hand. Snape's expression hardened. "Where are today's potions?" he asked in a voice that might as well have been a cauldron boiling. Rogue swallowed. I didn't manage to make them, Professor." Snape's displeasure deepened, but he didn't indulge in a lecture. He flicked aside his cloak and set a cauldron on the workbench. Rogue forced himself to focus. It was one of Snape's rare practical lessons, and he needed every ounce of attention he had left. Professor Snape produced 2 plants with large, glossy leaves. Rogge recognized them from magical aquatic plants of the Highland Lakes and their properties, gillyweed. He muttered under his breath, already imagining the Black Lake. "What is gillyweed used for?" he asked. Snape set out clear water, powdered dragon scales, and other ingredients, preparing them with precise motions. Swallowing it raw grants webbing between the fingers and toes and temporary gills on the neck. Rogge answered quickly. He could recite the book like a litany. But it only lasts an hour, and any potion master worth his salt wouldn't use raw ingredients when you can process them. As a potion master, one should never use raw ingredients directly, he added with the solemnity Snape had drilled into him. Swallowing gillyweed straight is barely better than throwing it away. Snape poured clear water into a copper cauldron, set the fire to a steady boil, and added the gillyweed, sliced small, stirring clockwise for 10 minutes until the liquid began to smoke green. He folded in powdered sea dragon scales and stirred until the powder dissolved. Then he reduced the flame to a near smolder, letting the mixture simmer for 15 minutes. When the cauldron had cooled, the potion had taken on a sea blue color. "Bring me 10 waterweed plants before school ends tomorrow," Snape said, tossing a pack toward Rogge and sending him off. Once out of the dungeon, Rogge opened the undetectable extension pouch on the pack. Inside were processed troll materials, a glass jar of troll mucus, a smaller jar with an eyeball preserved in amber, a thoroughly cleaned troll hide that gave off no foul smell, and odds and ends piled together. The troll's head had even been prepared as a specimen, suitably grisly for hanging. Snape had been thorough, everything stowed away but no waterweed, no gillyweed ingredients for Rogge to take. Rogge's mind started to work. He could try to borrow from Snape's office, but the idea made him uneasy. Sneaking through a passage to Hogsmeade or violating school rules was out of the question. The Black Lake was huge and full of things: merpeople, giant squids, grindylows, man-eating eels. The books made it sound dangerous enough. Worse, he hadn't found the waterweed's exact location on any map. Asking Snape would only earn barbed humiliation. The better bet was the approachable Hufflepuff head of house. "Little Rogge, come quickly." Professor Sprout called from the greenhouses and ushered him inside. She pressed his hands into warm, soft soil and told him to close his eyes. The earth smelled faintly of damp mint, and Rogge felt the soil give under his palms like an embrace. He heard the slow rustle of Radman grass and the sharp, medicinal scent of dittany. He even fancied he could sense the melancholy of hellebore. "This feels like another world," Rogge murmured with his eyes closed. "Yes, the warmth of the earth, the sun, the vitality of the plants," Sprout said, pleased. She had always taken a particular fondness to Rogge. She could see the darkness in him from Azkaban, but also the stubborn will to fight it. She believed he had a rare affinity with living things. Rogge let himself daydream for a moment, rocking quietly under a grapevine, Yumi sleeping in his arms, then opened his eyes. "Professor, could you spare a few gillyweed plants? Professor Snape wants me to collect waterweed from the bottom of Black Lake." "Waterweed?" Sprout's face tightened. She put down her trowel. "Waterweed grows on the bottom of Black Lake in Merperson territory." "Merpeople?" Rogge said, picturing fairy tale sirens. Sprout waved a hand and began to sketch their features in the soil. "Don't be fooled by stories," she warned. "They're nothing like the mermaids in books. Their skin is rough, like withered Radman leaves. Broad noses, dorsal fins, hollowed-out cheek sockets, yellow, piercing eyes, and rows of sharp teeth. They are different from us, certainly, but they are considered human." "How do you mean?" Rogge asked. "In the Ministry's original definitions, any creature that could speak a human language was classed as human," Sprout explained. "Later there were changes. Merpeople refused to be grouped with creatures like banshees and vampires, and so they gave up the chance to be fully recognized by some standards. Still, on the lake, they have their own schools and communities, and they don't take kindly to wizards." Sprout frowned at the idea of Snape sending a first year down there. "I'll speak to him. Sending a pupil is irresponsible." "Don't worry," Rogge protested, waving his wand. "My spells are strong. I'm not afraid of trolls." He added more soberly, "If a merperson harmed a student, the headmistress and the ministry wouldn't let them get away with it. Maybe I can make some merperson friends." Seeing Rogge's determination, Sprout relented. She fetched 5 or 6 gillyweed plants from another greenhouse. "Take these," she said. "Each plant will let you stay underwater for an hour. If you go down, have a friend on the shore watching. Tie a rope around you so they can pull you back if anything goes wrong." "Thank you, Professor." Rogge hugged her briefly. "I'll give you one as a souvenir." The next evening, Rogge stood at the edge of Black Lake with the potion Snape had brewed. Hermione was buried in homework, so Daphne agreed to watch from shore. She held one end of a charmed rope. The other end was tied around Rogge's waist. "Are you really going down now?" Daphne asked, worried. "Maybe tomorrow? It's so dark out there." "Don't worry. Rogge said, shrugging off his shirt and revealing the lean muscles he kept hidden beneath his uniform. My eyes are like an owl's. I can see in the dark. He uncorked the glass bottle. The potion smelled faintly of sea and dragon skin. Rogge swallowed it. The change was immediate. His legs fused and lengthened into a shimmering fishtail, and his black hair shot past his shoulders before stopping. Daphne gave a little cry. "Oh my goodness, Rogge, you've turned into a mermaid," she exclaimed. "I know." Rogge stared at his tail, surprised and annoyed. He had assumed the brew would be a refined gillyweed draught that extended the usual effects. Instead, with blue sea dragon scales added to the gillyweed, it had produced an altogether different transformation. He cursed Snape in his head and regretted not thinking it through sooner. A small girl standing nearby reached out, fascinated, and stroked the smooth scales of his tail. Chapter 58, Fluorescence. Cough, cough. Rogge grabbed Daphne's hand as she reached out to touch him. "Don't be so touchy." But Daphne's cheeks were flaming and her eyes were bright. "You're just so cute. Rogge, I want to take a picture of you like this and make it into a pillow." She sounded as if she wanted to hug him. Rogge's striking appearance matched every one of her imaginings about merpeople. "Stop that. I'm male. Really, I'm a male merperson," Rogge warned gravely. "Control yourself, Miss Greengrass. The potion lasts 4 hours. If I don't surface in 2, go find a professor." He rolled his eyes at her and ran a quick mental simulation. 1. You discover a merperson tribe at the bottom of the Black Lake. 2. The merpeople capture you and take you back to their village. 3. After some explanation, they realize you're a little wizard and release you. Stop simulation. Seeing no major problems, Rogge leaned back and dove into the Black Lake. "Rogge!" "The rope." Daphne pouted, staring at the rope in her hand that had slipped off his tail. She shouted, but it was too late. He had already gone under, and she could only watch helplessly. "Will he be all right?" she wondered, staring at the untroubled surface and praying nothing bad would happen. Without another thought, she swallowed the remaining potion on the shore. The change hit at once. She became a merperson, gave her new tail a graceful flick, and dove after him. Underwater, Rogge discovered the potion's flaw. It let a wizard breathe, but robbed them of speech. When he opened his mouth, only bubbles came out. He swam on, learning to move his increasingly familiar tail, and soon reached a dense forest of lakeweed toward the western part of the Black Lake. According to the professor, the merperson tribe lived in the middle of that forest. He followed a faint, shimmering light deeper in. Quietly approaching, he found a village built from stones of all sizes. Yellow-haired merpeople moved about, exactly as Professor Sprout had sketched them, impressive and a little intimidating. On the outskirts of the village, he spotted his real objective, a wide patch of luminescent water plants. He prepared to dive down and cover himself with mud as camouflage to harvest them, but a sudden heaviness seized his head, and everything went black. A watchful merperson named Mercus saw him sink, flicked her tail, and brought him back to the village. "He's awake! He's awake!" The merpeople crowded around as Rogge coughed and blinked. Next to them, they looked enormous, easily 7 feet long, and Rogge seemed tiny, a newborn beside them. Their voices were astonishingly beautiful, like sopranos singing, clear and resonant. "Leader, he's so beautiful. Just small," one whispered. "Do you suppose Headmaster Dumbledore found him off the Caribbean?" another asked. "Look at his skin and hair," a third murmured, poking tentatively. "Why are we so ugly? You forget, we live in cold water." Someone swam over, touched Rogge's smooth face, then her own, and sighed. "The Myro tribe in Ireland is even uglier than us." Enough. Mercus, taller and fiercer than the rest, snapped them back to order. "This is a little wizard from Hogwarts, not family." Rogge tried to explain, but only bubbles bubbled up, which set the village into operatic laughter. He made the universal gestures for friend, and then pointed at the glowing plants to show he'd come for them. Mercus considered him a moment. "Follow me," she said at last. "But if you trespass here again, I will be merciless." Rogge bowed gratefully. Mercus allowed him to take as many of the shimmering plants as he wanted and gave him a length of seaweed to tie around his waist. They were stern, but not cruel. No spears were used on him, and he sighed in relief as his task was completed. He was beginning to rise toward the surface when a merperson swam up in alarm. "Leader, a Grendulo is chasing a small merperson." Her yellow fins trembled. Her eyes flicked to Rogge with curiosity. "Oh no, it's Daphne!" Rogge's heart sank. Daphne must have come down after him, drunk the potion. He grabbed Mercus's fin and tried every gesture he could think of to make her understand that the pursued merperson was also a little wizard. "You little wizards are trouble," Mercus muttered, watching his frantic bubbles. "No wonder Headmaster Dumbledore complains to me." With a flick of her tail, she swam upward, raising the spear at her side. She sent a series of ringing sonic pulses through the water, the rallying signal for the Selkie tribe. Under her command, the tribe assembled quickly, and Rogge noticed that all the warriors were female. A matriarchal society, perhaps, but now was not the time for anthropology. They followed Mercus to the scene. The pursuer was a Grindylow, a huge, black, terrifying creature with a mouth full of sharp teeth and a tail thick like a snake but flexible. Daphne was swimming in panic, the Grindylow drawing closer. She cried out, but only bubbles escaped. "Daphne, over here." Rogge pounded the water with his hands, but his voice did not carry. "Little wizard, can you lure it?" Mercus asked him. "It cannot hear our voices." Rogge understood. He brought his wand to his mouth and cast Lumos. A sudden, bright light burst from the wand, turning the dark lake bottom into a glowing, deep blue. The Grindylow, driven by instinct, abandoned its prey and turned toward the light. "Brighter," Mercus urged when it hesitated. Rogge poured more magic into the spell. The lake bed erupted into radiance as if the sun had risen underwater, driving away the ancient gloom. Grindylows, lobalugs, glowing jellyfish, squids, and other lake creatures stirred and fled, the fish from the shipwreck darting frantically toward the surface. The Lumos was far stronger than any merperson had imagined. Mercus watched in awe as the terrors of the deep were chased away by sheer light. At Hogwarts, the students saw a stunning white glow ripple across the black lake and crowded to the windows to see what had happened. "I thought there would be a fierce fight," Mercus said afterward, breathless. "Turns out it was scared off by you." "Let us go. I will take you and your companion to the surface," she added, guiding them back toward the open water. Chapter 59, The Millionaire Snitch. On the way back, Mercus's affection for Daphne was obvious. To Daphne, he seemed to treat her like royalty. To Rogge, he looked like Daphne's servant. Rogge shivered with cold and wondered if merpeople really had such low status. When Mercus left, he gave Daphne a string of pearl bracelets and invited her to visit the Selkie tribe often. Rogge glanced at the seaweed around his own waist and the water grass tied to it and could only marvel at the difference. "Daphne, thank you," Rogge said. Despite the little wizard's impulsiveness being a constant headache, he was touched by her kindness. "It's nothing. We're friends." Daphne flicked her fishtail. The potion's effect still had time left, about an hour more, and the terrifying man-eating eels felt like a distant memory. Her smile was as bright as ever. "Rogge, can you give me the potions?" "These?" Rogge shook his head firmly. "No, Daphne, it's too dangerous under the Black Lake. I can't let you take that risk." "It's fine. Mercus will protect me," Daphne replied, smiling. The merperson who helped us earlier, her voice was gorgeous. "Aren't you afraid of them?" Rogge asked. Daphne cared a lot about appearances. The Black Lake's merpeople were hardly conventionally attractive. "Afraid?" Daphne considered. "They might not look good, but they're all kind." She loved the feeling of transforming into a mermaid and swimming freely. Beside the Black Lake merpeople, she felt even more beautiful and special. "Look," she shook the pearl bracelet and lit up. "Mercus promised to take me on an underwater adventure and teach me Mermish." She laughed. "Rogge, then I'll be able to speak underwater." "All right, but be careful." Reluctantly, Rogge handed the remaining 3 potions to Daphne. "The potion lasts 4 hours in total. You have to manage your time and write the recipe down." He tried to be practical as any older friend would. "Why are you as nagging as my mum?" Daphne rolled her eyes. Just as she reached for a vial, Rogge pulled it back. "Not today. I'll give it to you when we get back." "I want it now." Daphne flicked her tail. A splash erupted in front of Rogge, and she laughed triumphantly. Rogge wiped his face and pretended to be stern. "Dream on." They chased and played in the Black Lake as long as the potion allowed, laughing like children. Back on land, November in the Scottish Highlands was bitterly cold. Even strengthened by dragon blood, Rogge still wore a sweater and a scarf. Astronomy class on Wednesday evenings was the worst. Professor Aurora, wearing a towering wizard hat, was teaching students to identify constellations through telescopes. The class was fascinating, but the observatory sat at the highest point of the castle, and drafts blew from all sides. Rogge half wished he could cast Incendio on himself. "Rogge, there's a Quidditch match tomorrow. Are you going?" Daphne asked, adjusting a telescope, already bored. With the Black Lake frozen, she hadn't been back to the Selkie tribe. "Quidditch?" Rogge shook his head. The whole school knew he wasn't into it. "I need to go to the library." "The library?" Daphne sounded surprised. "Rogge, I thought you were Slytherin. How did you become a Ravenclaw?" "Daphne, I'm a Gryffindor," Rogge corrected, and Hermione, whose nose was red from the cold, sneezed. "And I go to the library every day, too. A coup." "Gryffindor?" Daphne looked at Hermione and sighed. "You're the least lion-like Gryffindor I've ever met." "I agree," Rogge grinned. "He went to the library because he had to. Hermione wanted to read every book there." "Humph, you have no say." Daphne shrugged him out of the conversation and pulled Hermione aside. "Hermione, let's go watch the Quidditch match together." "Together? We're playing against each other tomorrow. Are you cheerleading for Gryffindor?" Hermione smirked, and Daphne blinked. Of course, their houses were opponents. It was odd. Of the other three houses, 3 seemed to want Slytherin to lose. If Rogge hadn't made a few friends before the sorting ceremony, he would have been stuck only with Slytherin folk now. He glanced at Malfoy and his cronies and felt gloomy about his house's prospects. "Rogge, you've been reading Quidditch books lately. Have you fallen in love with it?" Hermione teased. "I knew it. No wizard can resist Quidditch." "No," Rogge denied it. "I'm looking up information on Bowman Wright, the creator of the Golden Snitch." He didn't keep them in suspense and took out the golden snitch he carried. With practiced fingers, he removed its wings and dismantled it into inner and outer parts. A golden snitch? Hermione held the disassembled snitch. She'd never seen a real one up close. With a small flourish of magic, the snitch's core hummed and vibrated. "Not exactly studying how it flies." Rogge brought out another box, the one found in Filch's office. "This is the collector's edition I found." Rogge had been poring over Quidditch and magical alchemy records from the 1200s to the present. There were only 100 golden snitches recorded as made by Bowman himself, he said. The box in his hands had the number 101 engraved on it. "Could it be fake?" Daphne asked, turning the box over, finding nothing obvious. "At first I wondered," Rogge admitted. "Then I wrote to a Quidditch collector. He assured me it was real and offered to buy it for 1,000,000 galleons. 1,000,000? Daphne and Hermione echoed at the same time, suddenly handling the snitch as if it were a priceless relic. "That's not the important part." Rogge pointed at the intricate winding patterns etched on the snitch's surface. "These curves look like a map." "Do you have a rubbing?" Daphne asked, carefully putting the snitch back in the box. "Holding it is too nerve-wracking." "Yes." Rogge unfolded the rubbing paper. A gust of wind from the rooftop flipped the paper, and it blew away. "Children, I think it's still astronomy class," Professor Aurora said, waving her wand. She used Accio to fetch the paper back. "Sorry, Professor," Rogge blurted out. Fortunately, Professor Aurora was kind and didn't deduct points from any of them. She glanced at the rubbing and then up toward the stars. "Do you recognize it?" Rogge asked quickly, hoping for guidance. "It looks like a star chart, but it's not quite right." Aurora pointed at a cluster. "You see these points? That's Sirius." Rogge looked up at the sky and then back at the paper. The two didn't match. "It's mirrored," Professor Aurora explained. "Thank you, Professor." Rogge's eyes lit up. The remark gave him the key to interpreting the pattern. "Rogge, do you think this is a treasure map?" Hermione asked, intrigued. She hadn't expected Bowman Wright to be so versed in astronomy. "It's very old." Rogge sighed. "Bowman Wright lived around 1200, nearly 800 years ago. If there were a treasure, it might have been eaten by time." "Not necessarily." Daphne shook her head. "There are lots of spells in the wizarding world that can preserve objects forever. Our school is an ancient magical ruin itself." Her recent explorations with the Black Lake Merpeople had taught her a lot about eons-old enchantments and preserved relics. Chapter 60. Whose Murder? "I heard Mercus say that some magic can even hold life in a static state," Daphne said, explaining what they'd learned about the ruins. Rogge and Hermione both looked a little surprised. "Static?" Hermione exclaimed. Isn't that immortality? No, no, no. Daphne shook her head happily. Finally something the know-it-all didn't already know. Life in a static state means your life stops flowing. When the magic is broken, time starts counting again, she told them. Since we've found a clue, why don't we take it easy and watch Quidditch tomorrow, she suggested. Rogge didn't need to rush, she argued. After all, it's been 800 years. One day sooner or later makes no difference. Besides, tomorrow our house is playing Gryffindor. What if the headmaster finds out you didn't go? Daphne added, and the implied threat was effective. Rogge thought of Snape's increasingly irritable mood lately and could only agree to go watch the match. The next day dawned clear and bright. Professors and students flocked into the Quidditch stands. The stadium was newly decorated, half Slytherin's silver green, half Gryffindor's gold red. From the central platform, Gryffindor commentator Lee Chiodon announced the match. Today, Gryffindor will face Slytherin. Look, Gryffindor has a new seeker, he cried as Harry entered the pitch. He's our house's first year, Harry Potter. Lee Chiodon watched Harry rise on his broom and gushed over it. Oh my goodness, it's a Nimbus 2000, the latest from Nimbus, first-class speed. Slytherin's old brooms don't stand a chance. Ahem, Professor McGonagall cleared her throat nearby, a reminder to be fair. Lee Chiodon restrained himself a little, but his commentary still favored Gryffindor. Go Gryffindor! Go Gryffindor! The cheers for Gryffindor, amplified by support from the other houses, quickly drowned out Slytherin's shouts. Rogge looked toward the Gryffindor stands and saw Hermione's banner glittering in the sun, impossible to miss. The players are in position. Madam Hooch has entered the field. The golden snitch has been released. Catching it ends the match and earns 150 points, Lee Chiodon announced. Madam Hooch threw the quaffle into the air. Let the match begin, Lee Chiodon shouted. Oh my. Rogge ducked as a small wizard flashed past close to his head. Gryffindor claimed the quaffle first, and their players streaked across the pitch towards Slytherin's goal. Beautiful, Lee Chiodon cheered. The one with the quaffle is our chaser, Angelina. She slipped past Slytherin's double team and charged straight through, he went on, watching his favorite dominate the sky. Angelina is an excellent chaser. Her skill is remarkable, and she's so charming. She was a substitute last year, but today she's completely outplaying Slytherin. Jordan, Professor McGonagall interrupted, telling him to focus on the match instead of fangirling. Sorry, Professor. Lee Chiodon nodded and continued, enthusiastically praising Gryffindor's play. A quick, direct pass, she fooled Slytherin's chaser, and the ball went to Alicia. What a slow defense. What a brilliant tactic. His commentary bounced around the stadium. The Slytherin students glared up angrily. Oh no, two Slytherin chasers are about to sandwich Alicia, Lee Chiodon cried. Great, the ball has been passed to Johnson. Oh no, Slytherin's taken the quaffle. Nearby, the younger students cheered, and Daphne jumped up with the others to support her house. The one with the ball is their captain, Marcus. He's rushing toward Gryffindor's goal. Can he score? Marcus charged for the hoop and hurled the quaffle. Wood swept his broom and knocked it away. A beautiful save by Captain Wood. The ball's in Katie's hands. It's a bludger, Lee Chiodon exclaimed. Katie tried to dodge, but Slytherin's Adrian snatched the ball. Adrian's flying toward the goal. Can Captain Wood stop him again? Nice. The Weasley twins struck another bludger, hitting Adrian. Gryffindor's beaters are on form, and Angelina has the quaffle again. She's clear ahead, accelerating. She's flying. The goal is there. Come on, Angelina. Goal! Gryffindor scores. Lee Chiodon's shouts and the Gryffindor cheers echoed in the cold wind. Even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff clapped. Around Rogge, he heard low grumbles and wails as he watched Harry lingering at the edge of the pitch. Harry's matches always ended with him catching the golden snitch. Slytherin launched another attack, but it failed, Lee Chiodon reported as Wood hit the ball away and Gryffindor countered. It's the Prenton back pass. Katie and Angelina's teamwork is practically telepathic. They tricked Slytherin's chasers. A beautiful backward pass. Keeper Leach was late again. Gryffindor scores. 20-0, Gryffindor leads. Damn it, Marcus actually grabbed a bat and hit the bludger at Wood. That's a foul! Gasps rose through the stands as Wood was struck and fell to the ground below. Professor McGonagall stood up, alarmed. Foul, the Gryffindors shouted. Madam Hooch shook her head. She regretted that Quidditch didn't ban such tactics. Obvious and despicable cheating, even if it doesn't break the rules. Damn Jordan! Malfoy muttered nearby, as if he wanted to silence the commentator. With Wood off the pitch, Gryffindor's substitute rushed in. His skill lagged behind Wood's, and Slytherin quickly closed the gap. Just as the Slytherins began to celebrate, Harry's broom suddenly lurched out of control. The broom swayed wildly, skyrocketing and then dropping, spinning as if intent on throwing him. Harry clung on, refusing to be thrown. The broom completed a full 360 degrees loop, and Harry hung there with only one hand. The crowd gasped. People fretted about the broom's madness and Harry's safety. Harry's broom is out of control, Daphne said, raising her binoculars and frowning. Don't worry. Headmaster and the professors are all in the stands, Rogue replied. Wood wasn't badly hurt when he fell. At worst, he'll go to the hospital wing. Rogue scanned the platform and quickly found Snape in his black robes. Nearby, Quirrell sat wrapped in a turban. Look there, Rogue said, pointing Daphne's binoculars. Daphne covered her mouth, surprised. She hadn't expected Snape to be so conspicuous in public if anything untoward was afoot. Professor Quirrell, he's doing nothing? Daphne asked, puzzled. He's too calm. Everyone else shows worry, fear, or even schadenfreude. Only he sits motionless. It's odd. Besides wandless casting, wizards can also perform silent spells. Our defense against the dark arts teacher might know such tricks, Rogue said. He couldn't imagine why Quirrell would cause trouble. Lord Voldemort wouldn't be that reckless to act openly under Dumbledore's nose. Even if Quirrell had the chance, what would he gain? Harry in the hospital wing for a few days? Maybe one of them wanted to throw Harry off the broom and the other wanted to save him, Rogue said with a faint smile, keeping his real thoughts to himself. Daphne pouted, annoyed at the riddle. Then something else flashed into view. Fire? Let me see who did that, she cried, sweeping her binoculars around, but she didn't notice Hermione slipping quietly away. Meanwhile, freed from whatever had affected it, Harry wrestled his Nimbus 2000 back under control. Like a cowboy taming a wild stallion, he brought the broom to heel. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers as he steadied above the pitch.